Chapter 1224. Last night, before Qinguang took Yin to the custom shop, in another time zone in China, a long-awaited variety show, God of Joy, was finally broadcasted. The show was an unprecedented success. Today, many families had countless choices. As a variety show, it achieved more than 15% of the ratings. Especially the special effects scene that was inexplicably released at the end of the show, which made the ratings reach 23% for a short period of time. This almost meant that there were at least 50 million people watching the live broadcast in China alone, and this did not include those who watched the live broadcast on the internet. The special effects scene at the end of the show undoubtedly caused a huge controversy. However, Chu Zijin did not explain this scene in the production of the show. She did not tell others that it was computer special effects, but she also did not say that it really happened. Everything could only be guessed. Chu Zijin's original intention was to use this method to deliberately stir up controversy. The development of the matter was basically the same as what she expected. After the show ended, the popularity of the news skyrocketed on the internet, especially after 10 p.m. Western and American audiences in different time zones woke up one after another. Perhaps they turned on their computers in the company, or perhaps they took out their mobile phones. Then, they were shocked by the shocking popularity of the news and quickly clicked on it. Whether it was Chinese or international audiences, their views of the show were generally similar. The first half of the show seemed to be an exciting variety show that could barely pass. It was a good explanation of the fact that Qinguang had incredible strength. Especially the part where he pulled the high-speed rail with his bare hands. It was quite amazing, as if it was a special effect. However, the show had always promoted reality. No matter how sci-fi it looked, it was indeed something that happened. The almighty Superman Qinguang could really do it. Combined with the previous videos of him catching bullets with his bare hands, the experience was better, and it was easier to accept this inhuman scene. The real essence was in the second half. If the first half of the show was inhuman, then the second half of the show was completely beyond the scope of human understanding. It was a scene that would only appear in fantasy novels or Western fantasy movies. It was not scientific or reasonable at all. However, this scene happened right after the challenge of reality. It made people subconsciously overturn their first impression and seriously examine or discuss it. Was it real or fake? What was the purpose of shooting this scene? To shoot a movie? There was no need for that. Not to mention the others, even the Tianguang group had a strong debate about this. The four great Vajras slammed the table and argued endlessly. Yu Hong and Su Li thought that the video was a special effect made by their boss secretly. The reason why he secretly gave it to Mr. Chu of the media company was probably just his usual way of hyping up. However, Fang Tianyu and Lu Xiaoyang firmly believed that the video was very likely to be real. Their reason was also very sufficient. Their boss would never do anything without a purpose. He must have a purpose for letting Tianguang Media put this video in the show. According to his own words, and according to his article in Hi. My God. Fang Tianyu and Lu Xiaoyang believed that the purpose of his participation in the fourth episode of God of Happiness was to announce to the world that he was unparalleled in the world. That's right. Therefore, the last scene of the show must be real. Then, Yu Hong and Su Li began to slam the table and spit. Damn idiots. You guys should be a little more normal. Use your melon seeds to think. Is there such an incredible creature in this world? Besides, where is he fighting with people? Is there such a place on Earth? You won't even believe it yourself. In the end, Fang Tianyu and Lu Xiaoyang were convinced and admitted that it was a special effects scene. Similar discussions like these four people were happening all over the world, but in the end, everyone reached a consensus. Although the scene was very real, and there was no trace of special effects, it was indeed something made by computer special effects. It was most likely Qinguang's next movie. Although there had never been a classic fantasy blockbuster in Chinese movies before, it was worth looking forward to just by looking at the special effects. In just over half a day, at least 1 billion people around the world had seen this scene in the killing world on their computers, mobile phones, or even in the special reports of TV stations, and they had heated discussions about it. No one would have thought that when they saw the video, an invisible thread would appear in their fate. This thread originated from them and spread to the sky, but after leaving the earth, it dissipated in the invisible void of the universe. At the moment when Qin Guang stood on the top of Mount Fuji, more than 3 billion of the nearly 7 billion people in the world had been connected to the video that Chu Zijin secretly shot in the Killing World. They might not have seen it, but at least they had heard it with their ears and knew it in their minds. The moment they knew about it, an additional thread appeared in their fate, but it was thinner than that of the people who had seen the video. Correspondingly, for those who had read it a few times or argued with others over it a few times, the threads that were tied to their destinies became especially thick. In the depths of the universe, which was so far away that it could not be calculated, these billions of threads suddenly condensed together, turned into a sharp cone, pierced through an invisible barrier, and stretched into a certain void. Then, the process of the integration of the real world and the real world, which was originally advancing steadily, was suddenly accelerated. These threads were like the iron chain on an anchor, pulling the two worlds together. This was the real reason why the integration of the worlds was suddenly completed when Qin Guang was on Mount Fuji. After his figure was swallowed by the crack, Liuli's long-disappeared figure slowly appeared in the sky above Cloud City in the heavenly Holy Grail. At this moment, she looked a little disheveled, her face was charred black, and her hair was disheveled. Liuli kept stomping her feet unwillingly. She looked up at the sky above Cloud City, where there was a vortex that was so huge that it could cover the sky above Cloud City, and it was sucking crazily. The power of the Holy Grail in the space of Cloud City was being sucked out at an extremely fast speed. At the same time, the pure white ground of Cloud City was rapidly melting. It first turned into liquid, then evaporated, and the gaseous power of the Holy Grail was replenished. The ground of Cloud City was sinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. Looking at this scene, Liuli sighed and muttered to herself, "Damn it, I still failed. Brat, I tried my best." It turned out that recently Liuli had realized that the situation was not good, so she took the initiative to suppress the heavenly Holy Grail. Her operation was considered successful before, but it was ultimately because of the My God. Too many unrelated people were connected to the power of the heavenly Holy Grail, thus destroying the barrier between the two worlds, and completely completing the process of the world integration. Under the precondition that time had stopped, perhaps only a moment had passed, or perhaps tens of billions of years had passed, Qin Guang finally opened his eyes slowly. What he saw was not the snow-covered scenery of Mount Fuji, but a familiar bed. The mahogany mosquito net rack, which had a history of at least 10 years, was placed on his head. It was very eye-piercing. What was even more eye-piercing was the poster pasted on the wall next to the mosquito net rack. It was Ronaldo, who had participated in the 2002 World Cup with Afu's head. Qin Guang's mind was in a mess. If he remembered correctly, this poster was pasted on the wall when he was still in primary school. At that time, Brazil had just won the World Cup, and Fatty had scored 2 goals in the final. I can't possibly be reborn as a child, right? Rub, 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 rub. It wasn't easy for me to conquer the world. My hundreds of millions of assets. It wasn't easy for me to get so many girls. It wasn't easy for me to practice all these amazing skills. It King sent me back to the past? It rewound for me? F***ck, F***ck, F***ck. Qin Guang screamed and sat up straight, thumping his chest and stamping his feet. No, my height doesn't seem to have changed. He looked down at his arms, which had blue veins popping out because of his perfect body, and then casually picked up his phone from beside the pillow and snapped a selfie. His eyes weren't playing tricks on him. It was still this familiar handsome face, and he hadn't returned to his childhood. Then what the hell is this? I'm clearly on Mount Fuji, but why am I lying on the bed of the old house I lived in more than 10 years ago when I woke up? At this moment, the door of Qin Guang's bedroom was pushed open with a bang. It was his father, Qin Guoli, who barged in. Qin Guang's eyes were filled with tears, and he finally felt at ease. Looking at his father's face and eyes, he knew that his father was still his biological father. There was nothing wrong with him. Bro, double hit, what are you howling about? Can't you make me less worried? Don't you know what time it is? You only know how to sleep. Chen Guoli rushed up and slapped his head. It was a man's singles technique that Chen Guang was quite familiar with. Chen Guang didn't feel any pain after being hit. Instead, he was happy. Chen Guoli immediately realized that something was wrong. He looked at Chen Guang with a strange expression. My silly daughter, did the nightmare make you stupid? Your dad is cooking in the kitchen. Chen Guang stared. If he didn't hear wrongly, Dad's logic was a little messed up. Silly daughter. On the other side, Chen Guoli looked at Chen Guang's confused face and panicked. He thought that he had beaten up Chen Guang, so he turned around and shouted, F***CK. My daughter's father. Quick, come over and take a look. There's something wrong with Chen Guang's brain. Chen Guang jumped off the bed and grabbed Chen Guoli's shoulder. Dad, what's wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with me. What's wrong with you? Chen Guoli was even more agitated than Chen Guang. He said angrily, You call this nothing wrong with you? You don't even recognize me. I'm your mother. Chen Guang hissed as he inhaled a breath of cold air. 10,000 alpacas were galloping in his heart. Damn it. But, Mommy, it's over. Chapter 12:25. Sai, that's right. You finally recognize me as your mother. Chen Guoli looked at Chen Guang with satisfaction. He had no idea that his gaze and expression were giving his precious daughter the creeps. With that said, Chen Guoli patted Chen Guang's head again. What do you mean? Hurry up and wash up and have breakfast. Don't forget that you still have to tutor your brother in the morning. Chen Guang continued to look dumbfounded. He was alarmed. Holy sh**t, does this mean that not only did I not lose a family member after the world fusion, but I even gained a brother? How the F***ck is that possible? No, this is quite wrong. The current situation made Chen Guang feel a little familiar. If he didn't remember wrongly, about a month or two ago, he had also encountered such an upside-down world on a plane. Many things had been reversed. At that time, Chen Guang had nearly broken down. Fortunately, this state didn't last long before he returned to normal. He never expected it to happen again. Furthermore, it was after the world fusion. Does this mean it's going to be like this in the future? Isn't this a little inappropriate? Also, what's my brother's name? What does he look like? Why don't I have any impression of him at all? Did I get it wrong somewhere? 15 minutes later, looking at Fan Lingshan, who was sitting at the same table and eating, Chen Guang felt like he didn't even have enough blood to vomit. Just now, my dad, okay mom, was referring to Fan Lingshan as the big brother. On second thought, it didn't seem wrong. She was originally his younger sister, but she became his brother after the world turned upside down. According to the old world's timeline, it should be winter break now. Fan Lingshan should have returned to her hometown for winter break not long after she finished her final exams in the first semester of her senior year. In fact, Chen Guang really wanted to ask if Fan Lingshan's surname was Fan or Chen, but he was afraid that he would anger his parents to tears. Is there really an elder brother in this world who can forget his younger sister's surname? Therefore, he suppressed the matter and only called out Lingshan's name. After the meal, he was dragged to tutor Fan Lingshan. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Chen Guang saw her surname on her workbook. It was not Fan or Chen, but Hua Lingshan. Chen Guang was confused again, but he didn't dare to ask. He could only blame the world for changing too quickly, to the point where his brain could not react at all. He could also blame the heavenly Holy Grail for changing the entire world, but he, who had fallen into the space-time rift, was the only one who had been forgotten. Tutor or anything, that didn't exist. He couldn't be a tutor for the rest of his life. When he flipped open the mathematics textbook in front of him and saw that it was Chinese, he immediately broke down. He tried to look at the teaching materials again and found that he was no match for them at all. Even the literal meaning of the words written on it was completely opposite. If he opened his mouth, he would be exposed. After making a casual joke, Chen Guang ran out of the room in pain. After coming out, Chen Guang did not dare to communicate with others. Instead, he ran straight out of the house and wandered on the street. At the same time, he took out his phone to check his contact list. After discovering that the names in his phone had not changed, he felt a little more at ease. In addition, he tried to circulate his inner strength without any problems. His martial arts skills were still there. Then, he tried the special ability of the Earth Paste Exploder and quietly condensed a palm-sized stone in his palm. The special ability was also present. Alright, now that the most basic abilities were on him, there was nothing left to be afraid of. But after eavesdropping on the people bargaining in the market for a while, his mood became very bad again. They were clearly selling pork, but the buyer asked how much they were selling carrots for. He escaped with an incomparably sorrowful heart, and then he was severely injured in front of the county town's pier. The pier was supposed to be a bus terminal. If this continued, he would probably go crazy, right? In addition, Chen Guang could not determine the situation of Tianguang Group and Chengguang Environmental Protection. The contacts in his phone did not change, but it did not mean that their identities were the same as before. For example, Lin Jingwei might be a poor man, Bai Fan might be a rich young master, Yu Hong might be his own boss, and Lu Xiaoyang might be an unemployed gay man. In short, the people were still the same, but their identities might have changed. The most annoying thing was that he could not call them because of the disorder of logic. Otherwise, how could he speak? Am I your boss? Then the other side would reply, no, I am your boss. Then the question was, who was the boss? Chen Guang looked up at the sky and could not help but feel sad. Last time, there was a reason to return to normal, but this time, the whole world was saying goodbye to the old world and moving towards a new one. If this was always the case, then the rest of his life would be a little sad. Standing on the side of the road, looking at the various cars on the left, Chen Guang did not feel very good. Damn, if I am not mistaken, the steering wheel is on the right side of the car. He took off his hat and wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Chen Guang. At this moment, a scream came from not far away from him. He turned around and saw a few high school girls holding their palms and looking at him with infatuation. It seemed that his identity as a super online celebrity was still there, so Tianguang Group still existed. Hey, we are your idols. Your program a few days ago was amazing. The high school girl's next words made the smile on his face freeze. He waved his hand weakly. Thank you for the compliment. After saying that, he turned around and ran away. He did not want to talk to anyone at all, because he found that his heart was in a mess again. This time, the reversal of logic seemed to be different from the last time. For example, the meaning of the words you and me did not change, but it still brought him great inconvenience. When the sky turned dark, Chen Guang went home with a heavy heart and had his breakfast. He did not say much and went straight to his room to try to turn on the computer. He planned to read some current events or historical materials and try his best to understand the current situation of the whole world. But in less than 5 minutes, he completely broke down. With his current logical thinking, it was too difficult for him to connect with the whole world. Looking at the cup on the writing desk, Chen Guang sank his thoughts into it again. This time, Lily was finally in it. She looked a little tired and her mental state was not very good, but at least she could speak. Lily, can you tell me what is going on now? Chen Guang stood in front of her and asked with his hands on his hips. As he spoke, his eyes kept wandering all over her body. The feather dress she was wearing had been slightly upgraded from a bikini to a piece of cloth. It was very much a new fashion of the next generation. Lily raised her head and looked at him with shame. As you can see, your real world and the real world have completely merged. From now on, your real world is also considered one of the 9 special worlds in the Heavenly Holy Grail. But other than the fact that other people's logic has become chaotic, I don't feel any changes at all. That's because you were sent to the end of time and slept for too long. Your perception has become dull, and it will take a while for it to recover. As for the problem of logical confusion that you mentioned, that is the sequela of direct integration. Don't worry, it will slowly return to normal after a long time. Really? But those words, those books that have been printed, the sign on the bus station with the dock printed on it, and those cars with the steering wheel on the right, can they also return to normal? Lily laughed mysteriously. Of course. But won't that be discovered? Lily shrugged. You're thinking too much. It's like putting a fish into a basin of water and moving the basin from the living room to the kitchen. Will the fish know? When changes keep happening, everyone's memory and outlook on life will be constantly revised. Only you, the savior, can see this change as an outsider. In the eyes of others, there won't be any problems. Don't underestimate the power of the heavenly Holy Grail. It can create planes, and of course, it can also change planes. Then what should I do now? Eat and drink. If you don't want to talk to people, then talk less. Otherwise, find a quiet place to hide and wait for everything to return to normal before dealing with others. In addition, you have to be mentally prepared. There will be more things happening in the next few days. Eventually, you should be able to slowly reach a stable state. All right, I understand. Chen Guang nodded and asked again, is there still no movement from the deer fruit? God knows where she went. I don't know either. As Lioli spoke, she turned her head and looked in the direction where the deer fruit was originally standing. Her expression was rather disappointed. Chen Guang felt that ever since the heavenly Holy Grail's drastic change, Lioli had also changed a lot. She was no longer filled with an unapproachable divine might like before. When she spoke and did things, her demeanor was more like that of the mortal world. In the past, although she spoke like an ordinary person, there was still a sense of aloofness in her bones. Now it was all gone. After coming out of the cup world, Chen Guang stood in front of the window again and looked at the people coming and going on the old street. He carefully felt the possible changes that Lioli had mentioned. There was a barber shop across the street, but the sign hanging on it was Jie's hair growth house. It was a little intoxicating. Chen Guang pricked up his ears and concentrated his energy. He was able to distinguish the sounds coming from the hair growth house from the noisy street. The shampoo inside was introducing business to the customers and tricking them to apply for a card. It seemed that all barbershops in the world were the same. No matter what the name was, getting people to apply for a card was the same. The customer inside had already been tricked to the point of being tempted. While the two of them were chatting enthusiastically, Chen Guang, who was across the street, felt his eyes blur. Right under his eyes, the sign of Jie's hair growth house had unexpectedly turned into Jie's barber shop, without any warning. The entire change process lasted for less than 1,000th of a second. It was completed in the blink of an eye. Then, the shampoo guy who was bragging about his business suddenly changed his words from hair growth house to, bro, I'm not trying to brag, but our hairdresser's skills are the best among all the barber shops in the county. I'm not trying to brag, but our hairdresser is the best among all the barber shops in the county. Applying for our card is affordable and reliable. If you apply for a card now, you can charge 200 renminbi and get 100 renminbi free. There won't be such an event next week. Chen Guang sucked in a cold breath. The shampoo didn't know that his consciousness and outlook on life had been completely changed at this moment. He didn't notice anything unusual at all. Chen Guang looked up at the bright moon that was slowly rising in the distance. He couldn't help but think that at this moment, it wasn't just the hairdresser who had been changed, but everyone in the world except himself. But no one noticed it. This situation reminded him of a conjecture he had seen a long time ago. Some people said that the human universe didn't really exist. It was simply the embodiment of virtual data. It was formed by the projection of two-dimensional data into a three-dimensional world. The entire universe was a huge flat surface. Otherwise, why would the Milky Way be flat? In fact, that was because there were real projections under the universe. All the rules in the universe were also set by humans. Many people, including Chen Guang, scoffed at this idea. Everyone was alive and well. How could it be data? Did it mean that they were playing online games? Especially after Chen Guang obtained the heavenly Holy Grail and walked through the small worlds like the world in the cup. He also saw the people in the cup trapped in the cage in the sea of time and the realm of true martial. He was even more certain that he was in the real world. But now, his idea was shaken. Perhaps all of this was fake? Just like when he played the single-player game, Legend of the Three Kingdoms, he used the Jinshan Ranger to modify Zhao Yun's martial power value to 99999. He could kill anyone with one slash. If the game character Zhao Yun was alive, Would he know that his martial power value had been modified? Perhaps, in his memory, his martial power value should have been this high from the beginning. Chapter 12:26. Once this thought popped up in his mind, Chen Guang suddenly felt extremely terrified. If that was the case, could it be that he was also a fake? That everything was fake? But if I'm also fake, then what's real? Wait a minute, two words suddenly popped up in Chen Guang's mind. That's right, the real world. Wasn't it referring to the real existence? If everything in the past was an illusion, then now, should this be the process of evolving from illusion to reality? With this thought in mind, Chen Guang looked down at his hands again and clenched them tightly. The sense of reality that he had never felt before became exceptionally strong in his heart. But after the sense of reality, he felt exceptionally empty, as if everything was very illusory. It seemed that this was the case. In a sense, the world that he lived in before was also not a complete existence. There were still loopholes in the rules, just like how scientists' research on the wave-particle duality was sometimes correct and sometimes wrong. Regarding the changes of many particles in the microscopic world, it was still impossible to arrive at an accurate conclusion. Various uncertainty laws for elementary particles often appeared in many textbooks. In research, even the existence of these particles was still in an unstable state. Let's simply assume that if a person's body was made up of countless alpha and beta elementary particles, but after billions of molecules, these alpha and beta elementary particles would become gamma and delta elementary particles 1 second later. The real process might be billions of times more complicated than this, but the concept could be understood in this way. Then this meant that as a living life, the parts that made up the body would always be constantly shaking and changing. In other words, the person would still be the same person, but after billions of molecules 1 second later, this person would objectively become another person. This meant that everyone would always be reincarnating all the time, but they themselves would not be aware of it. Thinking about it this way, it was really frightening to think about it in detail. Therefore, according to Chen Guang's current judgment, it was very likely that after the real world and the real world were completely integrated, the original incomplete rules might be completed, and the microscopic particles that were always changing might truly stabilize. According to the speed of human progress, it might take at least hundreds of millions of years of reproduction and development to see that level. They would have to leave their footprints all over the universe and constantly improve their civilization level in the universe. Only then would they be able to use the power of science and technology to peel off the surface of the microscopic particles layer by layer, break through the shackles that the microscopic world could always be infinitely divided, and explore the truth bit by bit. Only then would they realize the truth of this change. But objectively speaking, that was what happened. Now that the worlds had fused, when the microscopic fundamental particles had completely stabilized and were magnified to the macroscopic level visible to the naked eye, and then to the entire Earth, the entire solar system, or perhaps the entire universe, there would also be an invisible fundamental change. A stable world is a real world. In addition, if one tried to understand it from the level of life and soul, they might be able to deduce it in this way. The incomplete world was actually an illusory world. In such a world, the soul was often in a state of closed circulation. After a person died, there would be reincarnation. Although Chen Guang had never died, no one knew if the world after death really existed, and no one had ever been able to prove whether reincarnation was real or not. But according to everything he knew now, he deduced two possibilities. Humans did indeed have souls, and after death, they could indeed be reincarnated. The many legends and myths left by the ancients had already shown their thoughts on this. The people of Wuxia described it as the underworld and the heavenly court, the Hindustani Buddhists described it as the afterlife of cultivation, and the Christians described it as heaven and hell. In short, different regions would have different ways of thinking, but the essential meaning was the same. It was just that with the further development of science and technology, people chose to believe in science again and questioned this theological or metaphysical theory. But science and theology, in a sense, were different approaches to achieve the same result. When the scientific theory advanced to various uncertain laws, whether humans were really alive or not was already a metaphysical topic. After all, the human body was also composed of hydrocarbons, molecules, atoms, protons, neutrons, electrons, and even more subtle quark particles that could only exist for a very short period of time. The material that made up the body was forever changing. Only the soul that the body carried could be eternal. However, the price of eternity was that every time one died, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Even if one was reincarnated, the memory of one's previous life would completely disappear. In this way, even if the soul was continued, the life at a certain stage had completely died. The soup of Mengpo was a speculation in the ancient Huaxia legends, and it did not really exist. But it was an unquestionable fact that the soul carried by an unstable body could not be continued. This kind of reincarnation and rebirth was no different from real death. Another possibility was that after a person died, they did not really disappear, but turned into another kind of life in the form of a soul life, or in the form of an energy life, and continued to live in this universe. But after the real world and the real world merged, what would the world, or the universe, look like? Chen Guang crossed his legs and sat on the chair, fiddling with the world map that he found in his hands. His mind was completely open to thinking about these questions. After the fusion, would everyone remember the things of their previous life after resurrection? But this was no different from the lower realms like the transient sea and the realm of true martial. Those who were trapped inside would instead feel that it was a cage. It's the space and channel for ascension. At this moment, Liuli's voice sounded in his heart. This divine emperor had unconsciously started to pry into his thoughts again. Chen Guang asked, "Channel for ascension? Can you say it more clearly? In this world of yours, isn't there a story like this? It said that Laozi rode a green bull out of Hangu Pass, and then the purple aura came from the east and ascended to immortality. Or it's like what is written in some martial arts novels, where someone trained his martial arts to the realm of great success and finally broke through the void. Or perhaps someone has cultivated enough merit and is ranked among the immortals." Liuli appeared to be exceptionally patient as she explained. Chen Guang was surprised. Could it be that these are all true? Fake. Liuli replied without hesitation. Chen Guang's face was full of pain. Then why did you say it? Liuli snorted. But we can't deny the wisdom of the ancients. Although their knowledge was not as good as you modern people, in terms of thinking, they were more imaginative and free. These myths and legends that you know are indeed the arrogant imagination of these ancients when they were thinking about life and death, but in a sense, they had indeed peeped into the next stage of thinking. It's a pity that they were not born in a good era. Even if they figured out the key points, they still couldn't jump out of the shackles of the rules. It's just like how they can see the moon when they look up, but they can never go up. Chen Guang said unwillingly, "But now humans can land on the moon." Liuli snorted. "That's right. Now that the real world has merged with your real world, then, your world has begun to become complete, so life in this universe has a channel for ascension. But isn't this the world in a cup? Where can it go?" Chen Guang asked. Liuli thought for a while. Although the ordinary world in a cup is a world that was created, the real world, as one of the special worlds, has existed from the beginning in my memory. It's not that simple. As for how far it can go, in my opinion, there is only one possibility. As she spoke, Liuli's image gradually became clear in Chen Guang's mind. Her finger was pointing at the sky. Chen Guang looked up blankly, but only saw the ceiling. But a word suddenly burst out in his mind. Endless heavenly realm? That's right. Every single person, no, every single life. I don't know about that. I'm just guessing. Why don't you try killing someone? I can't talk to anyone after I kill them. I don't know the answer either. And why would I kill someone for no reason? Chapter 12:27. Then there's no other way. You'll find out when you die one day. Don't you look forward to it? Liuli teased him with a wicked sense of humor. Chen Guang actually seriously considered this question for about 10 seconds and finally came to a very depressing conclusion. In his current state, wanting to die was millions of times more difficult than wanting to live well. Say, why are you so unlucky? It's hard to want to die, but it's also hard to live. If there really is a past life and this life, you must have been a rotten person in your previous life. Otherwise, you wouldn't have suffered such retribution in this life. Shut up. Goodbye. Qin Guang decided to ignore Lioli. At the same time, he found that the world map in front of him had changed in the blink of an eye. What the hell did the world map change? This was not just a simple picture. This meant that the terrain of the entire Earth had changed. Right before his eyes, the North and South America on the world map had been completely separated into two lumps. This was not the end. Africa and Europe were not separated, and there was no Mediterranean Sea. They were collectively called non-European continents. Then in this world's online slang, there must be no titles such as European Emperor and Unlucky Emperor. The archipelago of South Asia was completely connected to Oceania. The sea level between Asia and Oceania was smooth, with only a few small islands dotted with stars. The Bering Strait between Asia and South America was widened. Alaska no longer existed, but was flattened and pressed on South America. In addition, Qin Guang found that he was originally in Japan, but now the long and narrow island of Japan was also gone. It was completely connected to the mainland of China. As for the peninsula under the rooster's head of China, it also did not exist. Looking at the territory of China, which was at least a quarter larger than the 9.6 million square kilometers in his memory, Qin Guang was speechless for a long time. Not only that, the original messy names of the countries on the world map had also been rearranged. Qin Guang looked carefully for a while and slowly confirmed one thing. The number of countries seemed to have changed. Some countries no longer existed, such as the island countries, but there were some countries that he had never heard of. The overall number had decreased slightly. Silently putting down the map, Qin Guang turned his head to look out the window. His mind was a mess. This kind of operation was too overbearing, too King good at playing. At this moment, someone knocked on his door. Qin Guang looked down at the time. Before he knew it, it was already 11:30. Qin Guang, are you inside? I was eating barbecued meat outside just now, so I brought some back for your supper. The barbecue in Lulai County could be said to be the best in the entire province. Other than being a little too expensive, there was no other problem. Qin Guang also hadn't eaten for a long time. He felt that it would be good to eat some barbecued meat at such a special time to calm his nerves. So, he opened the door and asked, "Mom, why are you still eating barbecue outside at this time?" Chen Guoli gave him a backhand smack on the forehead. "Did you take the wrong medicine? Since when did I become your mom?" Chen Guang felt tired. It was really hard for him to live. Taking the barbecue wrapped in foil from his father, Chen Guang asked casually, "Is my sister asleep? Why don't we ask her to get up and eat some?" Chen Guoli flicked him again. "What, your sister? That's your brother." Chen Guang wanted to slap himself to death. "If I say another word, I'll be a fool." But he couldn't help it. "By the way, Dad, why don't we go to Japan as a family someday?" This time, Chen Guoli didn't knock him on the forehead. He just looked confused. "Japan? What is that place?" Chen Guang looked at his father's completely confused expression and immediately confirmed his thoughts. Sure enough, in the world that had been completed, Japan had never existed from the beginning. Looking down at the Liaodong province written on the map, Chen Guang finally accepted this cruel reality for a certain country. That, since it had become a part of China's territory, could the teachers still film? "Perverts, brother, I'm sorry. I'm a sinner for all eternity. Teachers, there's no more." His father couldn't stand Chen Guang's various mental disorders anymore. He scolded him a few more words and told him to quickly eat the barbecue while it was still hot. Then he returned to the master bedroom. Chen Guang took the hot barbecue back to the desk and sat in front of the computer with a pained expression. He took out the state of mind of going to the execution ground and opened the magnetic link search website that he had used countless times in his browser's favorites folder. He entered a few mysterious codes that he was familiar with by heart. 78123, HKO, 13985, etc. Actually, they were all there. He was simply stunned. Then, with the mood of a pilgrimage, he quickly downloaded the treasure behind these mysterious codes into the network disk. Then he locked the bedroom door out of habit to prevent his parents from suddenly breaking in at the critical moment. Then he clicked on the main film with great excitement. It was still the familiar face, the familiar plot, the familiar expression, the familiar fountain and whatnot. But there was one big difference. The people inside were speaking Chinese. Qin Guang and his friends were simply stunned. His friends were even so frightened that they vomited. After a violent convulsion, Qin Guang suddenly felt that everything had become so calm. There was even a feeling of enlightenment in his mind that he had seen through the world of mortals. He really didn't expect that as an old driver with many female confidants, he would easily fall under the pomegranate skirt of the teachers after so many days. It really couldn't be blamed for his poor willpower. As a good Chinese youth who thrived under the influence of many teachers, in the past, he felt that the infantry war history with Chinese subtitles was simply an extravagant hope and the greatest enjoyment in the world. After he became a language master, although there was no obstruction in listening to Japanese, Chinese people still preferred domestic high-quality selfies. There was no other way, domestic was the best. However, domestic was often not good enough. It was either shoddy production, or the artist's looks were really not good enough for the audience, or the quality of the photography equipment was low, or the lighting was so dim that it made people's hair stand on end. Then, the lines were very bad, and the faces were either mosaic or mask, which greatly affected the user's experience. Now that he suddenly saw an infantry war film in Chinese, how could Qin Guang not be shocked? But after he calmed down, he felt strange. This was very unreasonable. Since Liaodong province belonged to the territory of China, of course, it should abide by China's policies. How could it develop such an immoral industry? There was no reason for the old men in Beijing to be so open-minded, right? With such doubts in mind, Qin Guang silently clicked on the modern history, and after reading it briefly, he understood what was going on. Fortunately, as the world continued to change, the logical relations gradually returned to normal. Although it was a little difficult to understand, Qin Guang still managed to read it with difficulty. The times were different, really different. In addition, Liaodong Province was just an abbreviation, and the full name should be Liaodong Special Administrative Region. In the modern history, Liaodong Special Administrative Region had been separated from the territory of China for a short time, because during the Qing dynasty, China signed a territorial cession treaty with the United States, completely ceding this territory. A few years later, with the support of the United States, this area was established, and it was called the State of the Beginning of the Sun, meaning the rising of the sun. Ahem. In short, after the Second World War, the State of the Beginning of the Sun, as a defeated country, completely lost its sovereignty in front of the furious China. Political, economic, military, and other aspects were completely controlled by China. In 1978, when the 200-year territorial cession treaty signed by China and the United States expired, it was decisively taken back, renamed as Liaodong Special Administrative Region, and began to fully popularize Chinese. Of course, this territory had been separated from the territory of China for too long, and it had been deeply invaded by European and American culture, forming a social, economic, and culture that was completely different from the Orthodox Chinese. In order to take back this land, the predecessors of the old masters also gave the Liaodong Special Administrative Region great autonomy, and the tradition of love-action martial arts fighting was developed, but on the surface, it was prohibited to flow to other areas. Of course, that was the #1 driving force of human technological progress. People in the old world could rack their brains to come up with all kinds of special effects across the coastline, and they could not be prevented despite repeated prohibitions. Magnetic links, BT torrents, web disks, Q groups, WeChat, Weibo, and so on, there was nothing that could not be done. Now that it had become one of their own, it was even more explosive when it spread. Moreover, like the original Japan, the infantry war discipline was still illegal in the Liaodong Special Administrative Region, but it could be distributed overseas, and of course, it was very easy to export it and sell it domestically. Those who understood would naturally understand. In short, under this series of changes, this rather special situation was created. In addition, looking at the whole world, the changes in the Liaodong Special Administrative Region were still just a drop in the ocean. There were differences in the historical evolution of countries all over the world. Unfortunately, it was still a little difficult to read the article. After figuring out the problem that he was most concerned about, Chen Guang turned off the computer and went to bed. No matter how important the matter was, he would wait until tomorrow to read it. The next morning, Chen Guang woke up early. In order to prevent his father from talking to him and accidentally saying something wrong and getting his head smacked, Chen Guang decisively went out and asked for a private VIP room in the internet cafe outside. Because he had a straight face, although the cafe manager recognized him, he did not dare to disturb him. As a hometown native, although Chen Guang was still a well-known celebrity, there was not much mystery in Lilai County. In fact, the owner of the internet cafe was 2 years older than Chen Guang in high school, and he had some dealings with Chen Guang when he was studying. Another night passed, and his view of the world became more normal. Day was still day, and night became night again. Chen Guang read the article more easily. After spending the whole day in the internet cafe, Chen Guang walked out shaking his head in disappointment. He had suffered a lot. He never thought that under the new worldview, the world's most powerful country in technology and military was not the United States, but Wuxia. Now it was acting as the world's policeman, maintaining world peace everywhere. The world's first GDP and the world's 7th GDP per capita were all from Wuxia. The world's first PC processor design, manufacturing, and production company was not Intel, nor was it an agricultural company, but a Chinese company established in Yanjing Zhongguancun by Wuxia people. The one with the most aircraft carriers, the most advanced tanks, the most advanced metallurgical manufacturing industry, and the most advanced precision manufacturing industry was not the United States or Germany, but Wuxia. The reason for this difference in nature began in 1850. The complete destruction of the Qing dynasty happened decades earlier than in the history of the Old World. In the most critical decades, a group of reformists briefly established a parliamentary dynasty that ruled China. It was called the Hua dynasty. In the crucial Second Industrial Revolution, the Wuxia dynasty worked hard to catch up and catch up. It continued to make progress that was left behind in the past few hundred years of seclusion. It also brought into full play the deep-rooted creativity and constructiveness of the Chinese people. Although there was still a gap between them and the European and American powers, they could at least see the tale of others. When the Second World War broke out, the well-prepared Wuxia was far from as weak as it looked. The Old World fought a long war for 15 years. In the history of the New World, the war lasted less than 4 years. The United States of Japan was dumbfounded by the Xianxia plan by the two big bullets codenamed Dongzhua and Baiqi. They decisively raised the white flag. After that, they were completely liberated, and the new Wuxia Republic was officially established. They used the nuclear power in their hands to frantically plunder resources and technology from all over the world. The overall national strength of the Wuxia Republic was estimated to have caught up with the United States around 1985, and since then, it has surpassed them. Today, apart from being the leader in various fields of science and technology, the most typical example was that the high-speed rail in Wuxia could run stably at 400 km per hour without any safety accidents. The average speed of the high-speed rail in the world, Germany, was not even 250 km per hour. The gap was obvious. Construction was an innate ability of the Chinese people. We Chinese could even do farming in Africa. It was also because of the rapid pace of globalization. Otherwise, with the ability of the Wuxia people, they could even recover to the extent of the Han and Tang dynasties, where the GDP of a country was more than that of all the other countries in the world combined. In addition, there was also a huge difference in the long river of history. For example, there were many differences in the poems and songs that had been passed down from ancient times to the present. In the history of the New World, there were also the existence of Li Bai and Du Fu. However, these two poets were not as down and out as the two in the Old World. Instead, they had ascended to the top. Li Bai was the assistant minister of the Ministry of War of the Tang Dynasty, and Du Fu was the minister of the Ministry of Rights. They were busy with government affairs and military affairs all day long. How could they have the time to recite poems? These two were just typical representatives. There were many similar situations. Many of the people who left their names in history had overlapping names, but their achievements and fields were like heaven and earth. The later lord of southern Tang, Liu, was not a subjugated monarch. After him, southern Tang lasted for nearly 100 more years. Then, hundreds of years later, Dumu could not have written a sentence like, "The merchant girl did not know the hatred of a subjugated country. Across the river, she sang the flower of the backyard." This was the butterfly effect. Liu did not subjugate his country, and his jade tree backyard flower did not become the infamous sound of a subjugated country. Dumu also could not have written the poem, Wandering in the Qinhuai River, to satirize the later lord of southern Tang. But correspondingly, while history had lost some pearls, it had left behind some golden sentences. In the history of the New World, there were also poetry immortals and poetry saints, but they were not Li Bai and Du Fu, but two other people. The artistic achievements and attainments of these two people were not much worse than the original two. It was just that the essays and poems they wrote were different, and their life experiences were different. However, these things were too far away. Although it seemed shocking, it did not have much of an impact on Qin Guang's life. There were many that were more recent, and they had a great impact on him. Through the evolution of history, Qin Guang was also closely related to something else. For example, many of the classic songs and martial arts novels that had been popular in the past few decades, such as Battle Break, Do Luo, Grave Robbers Chronicles, and other well-known web novels did not appear. Even the lousy web novelist called Thing in the Fire that Qin Guang had been following had disappeared. The book that he had bookmarked on Qidian's network had become a huge scammer by the name of Shui Padian. This was simply toxic. He gave up after reading less than 3 chapters. F***CK, this scammer author was just like his name. He really wanted to break the heavens. In the old world, writers of this level should not even have the courage to upload their works, let alone sign a contract. The most infuriating thing was that this guy called Shui Padian was very popular, at least 10,000 subscriptions. How easy were the people in the new world to be satisfied? I can make countless people kneel and lick my Legend of the Evil God, right? Forget it, the old man did not lack money, so there was no need for him to be a plagiarist. Qin Guang shook his head as he returned home. When he entered the door, he saw Hua Lingshan. Student Lingshan called out sweetly, "Brother, come and eat." Qin Guang's eyes were filled with tears. "Brother, you finally called me brother." Chapter 12:28. Oh, okay. Back at the dining table, Qin Guang still didn't dare to say much, but Qin Guili didn't give him a chance. He said happily, "Today, your mom cooked personally. Why don't you comment on the taste?" Qin Guang thought about it again and decided to muster up the courage to give a thumbs up. "The taste is great." Then Feng Rong, Qin Guili, and Hua Lingshan's expressions changed at the same time. Feng Rong looked embarrassed. "I know you often eat good food outside. You look down on your mom's cooking." Qin Guang silently turned his face away. His heart was tired, really tired. After 4 or 5 days, everything that Qin Guang was familiar with finally slowly returned to the right track. Although the world's politics, economy, history, and geography had changed, at least he didn't have to be careful when communicating. He was afraid that he would do something that violated common sense, and say something that violated common sense. Seeing that everything had settled down, Qin Guang was ready to leave Lelai County for the time being. Now that he had enjoyed a rare vacation, it was time to return to Wujing. Whether it was the Guangding General Administration, the Tianguang Group, or Zhuo Jingxi, who had just returned to China with the photocatalyst products, they were all waiting for him in Wujing. Now, although he was still a 4th-year student, his special experience had created a special life for him. Except for the final exam and graduation oral defense, he had nothing in common with ordinary college students. Because he was inexplicably teleported back by the turbulence of time and space, he didn't leave a car in the county. He didn't have the luxury of going to the county's 4S store to buy a car when he returned to Wujing. He also felt that it would be too troublesome to have someone pick him up from Wujing. So, he simply got up early the next day, put on a cap, sunglasses, mask, and scarf, went straight to the station, bought a bus ticket, and took the bus back to Wujing. Ever since Qin Guang made a name for himself, he couldn't remember how long it had been since he last took a bus. Needless to say, it was a very special experience. Curling up in the bus, he took out his phone and began to fiddle with it, watching the news. For him, everything in the outside world was new. The whole world had changed, but he was the only one who retained his memories of the past. This was an indescribable feeling. It was as if he had transmigrated to a parallel dimension, but the people around him were still the same people. Faced with this situation, Chen Guang had a feeling that he was the only sober person in the world. His mind contained another world, but the minds of others contained a whole new world. No one knew about the various epics that had appeared in the past. The ancient books passed down by the ancients, the crystallization of the ancestors' wisdom, had all become stories that Qin Guang could only enjoy in his memory. The people in the new world might have similar stories in their memories, but they were fundamentally different from what Qin Guang knew. Along the way, Qin Guang fiddled with his phone while listening to the other passengers on the bus. The news in front of his eyes and the things that others were talking about were half unfamiliar to him, and the other half were familiar to him. Things that Qin Guang was familiar with, such as the Chinese football team's daily defeat and their failure to break through the World Cup qualifiers. Yes, the national football team was indeed the national football team. Do not have any expectations for them. Even if the world was destroyed, they would still be stable. However, others said that the group of people who played football did not know how to follow the example of the Chinese men's basketball team. Look at the Chinese men's basketball team, which was ranked in the top 3 in the world. At this moment, Qin Guang was dumbfounded. Didn't Yao Ming retire? Why did the Chinese men's basketball team become so strong? Unless the old man personally participated, it might not be possible, right? Of course, if there was someone like the old man, who could shoot anywhere he wanted, this kind of sport would probably not be a problem for other countries. This thought flashed in Qin Guang's mind for a moment, but he dismissed it on the spot. With his ability, participating in this kind of competitive sport was too much of a bully. To him, there was no sense of accomplishment. After a while, the people on the bus started talking about the variety show that was popular around the world a few days ago. It was God of Joy, which Qin Guang personally starred in. Qin Guang quickly put down his phone and pricked up his ears. As these people chatted, all they said was that Almighty Superman was really awesome, really strong, and that his combat power was really off the charts. Qin Guang felt that it was only natural. Are you kidding me? I can even pull a high-speed rail with my bare hands, and you guys are still not licking my boots. At that moment, the content of the conversation between two people in front of him made him feel exceptionally puzzled. Which monster do you think is the strongest? As one of them chatted, he suddenly lowered his voice to a volume that only the person sitting next to him could hear. I think the black and white impermanence in the labyrinth is the strongest. I don't think so. I think those mosquitoes are fiercer, and they even have growth attributes. Speaking of which, I really envy Almighty Superman, an S-rank player. If he had not personally released this video, we wouldn't even know that he had actually become an S-rank god. Actually, everyone has been guessing this for a long time, but he did not take the initiative to say it, and we can't ask him. What if he is not a player? What should we do? Of course, with the abilities he has displayed in the real world, it is only natural that he has the strength of an S-rank in the game. But I don't quite understand. Since he is already so strong, why have we never encountered him in the game? Isn't that simple? He is an S-rank, and we are just E-rank noobs. There is no way we can enter his map, right? Come to think of it, the other players who entered the game with Almighty Brother did not seem to have made any moves. These people have all reached C-rank in the end, right? I really envy them for having such a good life. If it were a normal newbie, they would not have received such treatment. Who knows how many times they would have died? These people are practically leveling up while lying down. After becoming players, we have already entered 3 missions, but we are still stuck at E rank. The voices of these 2 people were extremely low. Not only that, as they spoke, a special barrier appeared beside them, completely blocking the hearing of the other people on the bus. The other people on the bus were talking about the computer's special effects in the later parts of God of Joy. However, these 2 people were talking about the same thing from completely different perspectives. Chen Guang, on the other hand, could clearly hear their conversation. However, he could only feel his scalp going numb. His mind was filled with 1,000 black question marks. What the hell is this? What are they playing at? If I did not hear wrongly, they seemed to be talking about something that happened in the massacre world? But how could they know? It sounds like these scenes happened in God of Joy. But how is that possible? Also, game? Players? S rank? E rank? What is this? The 2 youngsters sitting in the first few rows are also players? And they have already completed 3 missions? Suppressing the indescribable shock in his heart, Chen Guang was finally willing to open his mobile phone and open the Hi. My God. In the 4th episode, he directly skipped to the latter half and finished watching the special effects that Chu Zijin had added. Then, he touched his forehead, his heart filled with confusion. There were too many Y's in his heart. In fact, there was someone who could answer him now. It was not just one person, but an entire organization. If the world knew that the only true S-rank player in the world, the Minister of Heaven of China's strongest awakened organization, Chen Guang, was actually so surprised that there really were games and players in this world, countless people would probably laugh their heads off. The chat between the 2 people in front had not ended. If I had known, I would have watched this show earlier. The almighty Superman has shown us a whole new realm. Now, I have more confidence in surviving in the game. I think so too. Maybe what prompted him to show the video was that we humans have been at a disadvantage recently. Our morale is low, and we can't even raise our heads after being beaten by the Protoss. Now, we know that there is actually such an expert among us. Is he going to lead the human race to blow the horn of counterattack? Speaking of which, we are all players. Why do we have so many taboos? We absolutely cannot reveal our identity to ordinary people, but he has done it well. He directly brought what happened in the game to a variety show. I've already said, us E-rank noobs shouldn't try to figure out the realm of the legendary S-rank powerhouses. Apart from himself, everything about S-rank can only be guessed. That's true. Maybe after surpassing A-rank, he can break away from the shackles of the game. I really envy him. Right now, we feel like we're walking in the dark in brocade clothes. It's so uncomfortable. It's good enough that we can continue to live. Being chosen by the game is also our fate. It's not like we've gained nothing, right? It's just that we can't bear to use our reward points to exchange for money. Otherwise, we would have been rich long ago. That's right. Those with weak minds have all been reset. Sigh, look at these people in the car. They don't even know that the reason they can live peacefully is because of us, the poor chosen ones, carrying the burden for them. The 2 of them did not know that the almighty Superman they had been talking about all this while was sitting in the second to last row behind them with his neck shrunk. He was so shocked by their conversation that he did not want to say a word. At the same time, Chen Guang was also baffled. He had no idea what caused this. If what they said was true, why didn't anyone contact him for the past few days after releasing such an important piece of information on the variety show? In the setting of the new world, what did I tell the people from the General Administration of Guangding and the Tianguang Group before I came back? He was a little regretful. If he had known, he would have called the people in his address book earlier. Otherwise, he would not have been so lost now. However, after thinking about it, he decided to forget it. It was not very clear to talk over the phone. With the previous state, he was afraid that they would not be able to communicate. He would talk face to face when he returned to Wujing. As Chen Guang thought about this, he raised his head and looked out of the car window. At this moment, there were still countless threads of faith points that others could not see slowly surging over from all over the world. The heavenly Holy Grail in his bag began to tremble slightly. Chen Guang picked up the grail and looked down at it. At this time, my strongest physical idol is about to be born? Finally. Chapter 12:29. As he sensed something, his mind was involuntarily pulled into the world within the cup. On one of the 3,000 high platforms on the city walls of Cloud City, a tall and mighty stone statue slowly rose from the platform. This stone statue was the appearance of Qin Guang himself. His upper body was bare, and the muscles on his arms were like coiled snakes. The contours of his abdominal and back muscles were equally clear. Although Qin Guang's physique was not as sturdy as the bodybuilders outside, if a true martial arts expert were to see his muscles, he might be able to understand why he was worthy of being called the world's #1 expert, and why he could become the most powerful martial saint in history. Although the muscles on his upper body were not overly strong, if one looked closely, every line, every piece, and every inch were perfect to the point of being impeccable. He was simply a perfect work of art. Not long after, the upper half of the stone statue was fully revealed. Just the upper half alone was more than 2,000 feet tall. The eyes and brows of the stone statue looked vivid and lifelike, full of heroic spirit, elegant and unrestrained, comparable to Pan and charming all living beings. The latter half of the sentence was all Chen Guang's own adjectives. In short, although they were both human statues, his strongest physical statue was clearly walking a completely different path from the previous acting statue. One could be classified as a little fresh meat, while the other was a standard man. "You brat, your luck is pretty good. You even got lucky this time." Liuli, who was standing in the middle of Cloud City, also turned to look at the stone statue and teased. Qin Guang asked, "What do you mean? If it was still your previous world, it would have been almost impossible for you to get your hands on this statue. Now that the worlds have merged, it's a blessing in disguise for you." Qin Guang only needed to think for a moment. Combining it with what the two players in the car said, he understood immediately. Regardless of why the events in the slaughtering world would appear in the form of special effects in God of Happiness, regardless of whether there were these scenes or not, he would still only obtain the recognition of a small number of people. There would still be many people who would regard the ancients as unsurpassable gods in their minds. There were also some people who, no matter how realistic a variety show was, would always look at it with doubtful eyes. Others might say that variety shows were like reality shows, and they all had a script. At most, the script of the almighty Superman was more shameless, played more shamelessly, and produced a crazier effect. For example, when he pulled the high-speed rail with his bare hands, it was very likely that there were other auxiliary forces. How could a normal human do that? Due to Chen Guang's long-term good reputation, those who held this view were definitely the minority. But no matter what, this would definitely affect the degree of his recognition, and thus affect the achievement of the conditions for the statue of God. Previously, although he was famous enough and there was nothing wrong with the attention, even if the last half of the fantasy scene was excluded, the audience still held two different views. Those who approved of him and those who disapproved of him clashed with each other. Now, there were more players in this world who knew what was good for them. They did not hesitate to believe that the special effects footage was real, and they were excited because of his sudden exposure as an S-rank player. Players were different from ordinary people. They had experienced many life and death trials, and their understanding of personal strength was on another level. After struggling in the test of life and death, the players' admiration and worship for the strong was far beyond that of ordinary people. Just like during the war, the reason why ancient generals were often praised for their bravery and courage was precisely because in such a special environment, only the strong could move freely on the battlefield. Those who could go through many wars without dying and make a name for themselves until the end were all true powerhouses. They first left behind their deeds, and then were praised by the world. With the spread of the word, the bravery of these generals would naturally be exaggerated, and they would often be 8 feet tall, and their weapons would weigh hundreds of kilograms. Right now, Chen Guang was also facing the same situation. Aside from him, no one had come into contact with the realm of S-rank players. Even if they had watched the video, they wouldn't be able to experience it personally. Therefore, they wouldn't be able to know the exact strength of the S-rank players. When the players speculated about his combat power in their minds, they would more or less exaggerate it, further causing the players' worship of him to become even stronger. With these people's blind worship piling up, it suddenly became the last straw that broke the camel's back, helping him to successfully achieve the trigger condition of the strongest physical statue of God. That's true, but it's still a pity. Chen Guang sighed. While chatting with Yoli, he was multitasking at the same time, focusing his attention on the newly born strongest physical body colossus. The giant statue was still slowly growing up like a spring bud that had just been unearthed. In the time it took to say 2 sentences, the giant statue's waist had completely grown out, and its inverted triangular abdominal muscles were very attractive. Kid, you didn't train your muscles for nothing. Even among the gods in the endless divine realm, there are only a few who have a perfect physical body like yours. Azure teased. Do gods also need a physical body? Are all the gods in the endless divine realm in human form? Chen Guang was subconsciously concerned about this issue. That's not necessarily true. Some gods don't have a physical body, just like the elemental creatures you once saw. In the endless divine realm, there are many different forms of existence that have god-level power. Of course, the most powerful gods would often constantly modify their own bodies in order to obtain more power. In the long history of the endless divine realm, everyone finally reached a consensus. Chen Guang asked, "What consensus?" Azure said very calmly, "The human form with 1 head, 2 arms, 1 waist, and 2 legs is the perfect form with the strongest combat power in this world." Chen Guang was shocked. That can't be, right? Why do I feel like the tentacle monster is a little stronger? The reason you think so must be because your imagination has been eroded by too long of a life. Go to hell. I'm not joking with you. Okay, let's assume that what you said is true for now. By the way, what's with Yu Ting? You seem to know him? Since they were talking about the endless divine realm, Chen Guang happened to remember this matter and quickly asked. Azure nodded. He's very strong. Hearing those words, Chen Guang instantly became spirited and asked, "And then?" "That's all." "Huh? Don't you know what happened next?" "He controls the power of lightning. Oh, and one more thing, he's one of the top 10 god emperors in the endless divine realm. He's slightly stronger than I am." Chen Guang expressed his shock. "Is he really that powerful? But I feel that he looks very weak in the slaughtering world. That's because he's only a projection that's suppressed by the heavenly Holy Grail. But I feel like he doesn't have the bearing of an expert. He can't make people fear him at all. 10 god emperors? It's like selling cabbages on the street." Azure suddenly shouted. "That's because you're naturally immune to it. Is that so? I'm that strong? I'm that talented?" As the two of them were chatting, a section of the deity statue's body unknowingly popped out. The root of its thigh also started to pop out. Then, the look in Azure's eyes started to change. Chen Guang was also slightly embarrassed. So the strongest physical body must only have a physical body? It's fine if my upper body is bare, but what about my pants? F***ck me. Why is the lower half of my body also bare? Looking at this huge stone statue with its bare buttocks, Chen Guang felt a little embarrassed in the depths of his heart. Damn it! What is going on in your head all day long? Azure cursed. Then she said, "Why aren't you changing the deity statue's image?" The deity statue's head was already almost at the knee position. Chen Guang lowered his head to look at his lower body. He thought to himself, "This heavenly holy grail is really a roundworm in my stomach." Not only is the face and the contours of the muscles exactly the same as the real person, even the capital of the lower body is done to perfection. Even the blood vessels and tendons on it are cough. Forget it, I'd better change my appearance quickly. Fortunately, the deity statue still has the right to change its image once. Immediately after, Chen Guang raised his arms and shouted. At the same time, he gave the order in his heart, "Put on my clothes." As his voice fell, the huge stone statue's upper body, which had already reached a height of nearly 300 meters, rapidly expanded. What was put on was the casual clothes that he was currently wearing. You, Azure turned her head and pointed at the deity statue. She looked like she wanted to strangle Chen Guang to death. Are you poisonous? Chen Guang slapped his forehead. He was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. The deity statue continued to pop up. Clothes were also put on, but there were no pants. It's not that I'm poisonous, it's the heavenly holy grail that tricked me. How would I know that when I said clothes, it would really only give clothes? Most of the time, when we say clothes, isn't it just clothes and pants together? You're silly. You don't know how to express yourself clearly. With the strictness of the heavenly holy grail, if you say clothes, it will definitely only give clothes. Forget it. Now that things have come to this, there's no other way. Chen Guang shrugged. Anyway, every deity statue only had one chance to change its form. Since it was wasted like this, it could only be said that it was fate. He decisively decided to accept his fate. Anyway, looking at himself, he would slowly get used to it. The appearance of wearing thick winter casual clothes on the upper body and bare buttocks on the lower body made the level and temperament of the most powerful deity statue, which was supposed to be incomparably noble and sacred, suddenly lower by a lot. You'll regret it. You'll definitely regret it. Azure turned her face away. She didn't want to look at that damned statue anymore. She turned her head and said meaningfully, but very angrily, "Don't bother about those details. Have you seen David's statue? This is called art, understand? What's there to regret? Anyway, there's no one else here other than you and me. I don't even know where Dear Cry has run off to." Chen Guang chuckled. He could only put on an expression as if a dead pig was not afraid of boiling water. At the same time, he started to check the production of faith in his heart. He wouldn't know if he didn't check, but after checking he got a huge shock. What was placed in front of him was a huge surprise. The production of faith in this strongest deity statue was off the charts. Currently, the maximum production of the middle realm deity statue of the Spirit Heavenly Cup was over 54,000, while the production of the one-line sky was over 540,000. According to his previous production, he only needed to gather one more middle realm deity statue of the Spirit Heavenly Cup to pass the test. The debt of over 1.4 billion faith points that he had on his back could be paid off within 2 years. However, it was very obvious that the strongest deity statue of the middle realm deity statue of the Spirit Heavenly Cup had completely surpassed the standard of the second stage of the one-line sky. Its true production of faith was 5 times that of an ordinary one-line sky deity statue, reaching more than 2.6 million a day. This meant that the problem of paying off the debt within 2 years had been solved. In at most 7 months, he would be able to clear off this terrible debt. Chen Guang let out a long sigh. When he turned his head to look at the statue that had no sense of beauty, he felt that it was much more pleasing to the eye. Azure, it's not that I want to criticize you, but the appearance isn't important. What's important is the inner beauty and its usefulness. My entire life is given by this deity statue. Shut up and scram. I'm annoyed when I see you. Finally, Lioli couldn't stand this shameless fellow and charged over to give him a kick. However, Chen Guang knew when to stop and retreated. When his mind returned to the outside world, he was in a very good mood after resolving a long-standing problem. He found everything and everyone pleasing to the eye. On second thought, the new environment he was in was not bad. Take the bus he was sitting on for example. In the old world, China's domestic buses such as Yutong, Golden Dragon, and Asian Star were fine to sit on. However, be it in terms of comfort or mechanical stability, overseas brands such as Volvo, Mercedes-Benz, and Toyota were far superior. It was only because they had an advantage in price that they had the upper hand in China's domestic market. However, it was different now. As early as 100 years ago, when China was still around, China's domestic industrial development had caught up. After the end of the 4-year War of Resistance, it took off. Now, no one in the world would believe that the strongest luxury bus brand was actually the wild horse under Chen Guang's buttocks. To others, the revitalization of the Chinese nation was a long process that required generations of people to persevere and fight for it. It was a great cause that required generations of people to shed blood for it and devote themselves to it until their deaths. However, to Chen Guang, he would be able to complete the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation after he woke up from his sleep. Chen Guang thought happily, "It's only because I'm thin-skinned. Otherwise, I wouldn't even know how to praise myself." In addition, he also had a lot less trouble. Before the world fusion was completed, his enemies who had placed a bounty on his head had basically ascended to heaven. Now that the worlds had fused, they had no chance of coming back to life. The people who were the most miserable were the people from the Xianxia Corporation and the Immortal Corporation. They even lost their country and became the Liaodong province of the old man's country. They probably didn't even remember this enemy of theirs. They would only wonder why important members of their families suddenly died one after another. Just thinking about it made him feel happy. In addition, the Tianguang Corporation was operating steadily. There were still some small problems with morning light environmental protection, but after Teacher Zhuo applied the new photocatalyst technology, all problems would no longer exist. Strictly speaking, the current China was like the United States of America in the past. The photocatalyst technology that he had previously brought out was still 50 years ahead of the world. Now that I'm rich, I have no enemies, and I'm free. If it weren't for what those two players said, it's time for me to enjoy my life. Chapter 12:30. Unknowingly, the car arrived at Wujing. When he got off the car, Chen Guang looked at the two players, without batting an eyelid, memorizing their appearances. However, he did not intend to inquire about their names. Merely two E-rank players were not worthy of his attention. Moreover, it seemed that players could not easily let ordinary people know their identities. Otherwise, they would be punished by the system. Although the two seemed bold, they were actually very cautious. Chen Guang did not know them, so he had no interest in scaring them. In addition, the barrier that the two used to communicate should not only block the perception of ordinary people. Other players should not have the qualifications to eavesdrop. As for why he could, Chen Guang expressed his calmness. He was not boasting or mocking. They had already said that the old man was the only S-rank player, so it was natural for him to have some special privileges. Innate level suppression was just like how low-level players in online games would see the attributes of high-level players as skulls and question marks, while high-level players would see the attributes of low-level players as clear as day. Chen Guang directly hailed a taxi and went straight to the location of the Guangding General Office. He did not call anyone in advance and chose to go there directly. When he arrived, the building where the general office was located was still the same. There were no changes to the height and area, but the building's appearance looked more designed. Sure enough, this was the benefit of China becoming stronger. Even its architecture was world-leading. Walking into the main hall of the general office, which was disguised as a multinational company's office building, the beautiful female agent sitting at the front desk was still a familiar face. When the two female receptionists saw Chen Guang, they revealed expressions of ecstasy. They enthusiastically nodded at Chen Guang, and at the same time, they picked up the communication device and said in a tone that was close to tears of joy, "Attention everyone! Attention everyone! The department head is back." Chen Guang's heart skipped a beat. What? Did I hear wrongly? Department head? Although he heard that the Guangding General Office had been promoted to a ministerial level, shouldn't his position still be that of a director? What's wrong? Why did my title change? Right, I have already retired, so my title can at most be Old Chrysanthemum, Pui Old Director, right? Considering the confidentiality regulations, even though he was the former leader, shouldn't he be denied entry? Shouldn't you at least ask why I'm here? What was going on with the two of them being so ecstatic? With this in mind, Chen Guang walked into the elevator with a belly full of suspicions. He then entered his fingerprint on the elevator and pressed the buttons for several floors at the same time. However, the elevator kept descending and finally stopped at the basement third floor, where the buttons did not show. The moment the elevator door opened, all the employees of the Guangding General Headquarters, led by Xian Qin and Wu Miaowan, appeared in front of Chen Guang. As far as the eye could see, There were more than 300 people standing in the lobby of the 200-square-meter elevator. Everyone was looking at him with incomparable worship and fanaticism in their eyes, making Qin Guang's hair stand on end. I've become more handsome? Became more handsome? What the hell were they doing this for? Minister! I knew you wouldn't leave us behind so easily. The first to speak was actually Wang Lin. He came forward excitedly and carefully looked at Qin Guang. His gaze was so attentive that it was like a fanatical painter admiring the authentic works of Da Vinci. Minister! I knew you would succeed. Now we have hope. Looking at Wang Lin in front of him, especially the light green faith value thread that emerged from the top of his head and connected to the heavenly Holy Grail, Qin Guang could not help but be shocked. This young man was originally a fanatic, but he could actually become even more fanatical? What the hell did I say to them before, and what the hell happened? Qin Guang's heart was full of questions, but since everyone was so worshipping him, he could not reveal the truth that he had amnesia. He could only laugh and pat Wang Lin on the shoulder. Look at how excited you are. It's just a small matter, not worth mentioning. All right, everyone can disperse. Go do what you need to do, work is more important. Therefore, even those who did not have any talent would be able to feel it after being an official for a long time. Now that Qin Guang had used these words, it was really easy to get away with it. After everyone's emotions gradually calmed down, they saw that the minister had a serious expression and was not in the mood for small talk, so they all obediently returned to their respective offices. Of course, it was not that Qin Guang did nothing. In this short period of time, he quietly investigated the situation of everyone present. Those who were supposed to be inner strength experts still had inner strength in their bodies. Even a few of the elites who were originally transferred from the army had some signs of inner strength in their bodies. It was probably because they had been colleagues with the martial artists for a long time. Everyone had a good relationship with each other. Under the new situation, the Jianghu people were no longer as selfish as they used to be. Those who could teach them a few moves were very frank and generous. Of course, it was a little late for ordinary people to learn martial arts at the age of 20 or 30. However, the military elites who were chosen to be by his side were dragons and phoenixes among men. Their qualifications were incomparable to ordinary people. In addition, many of these people had received training from Qin Guang himself in the Shun's special training camp back then. It could be said that they had a good foundation. Later, they dabbled in martial arts as elderly apprentices. Although they could not achieve too high achievements, they could practice a little bit of inner strength and barely get started. Sitting in his office, Qin Guang thought about the concentrated lecture he had promised everyone in the old world. Given his personality, since he had said it, of course, he had to do it. However, since the entire world was different now, did the previous promise still count? It was not difficult for him to deliver all living beings from suffering, but he was not sure if he had said such words in the history of this new world. In addition, he was now the minister. When Wang Lin mentioned that he would definitely succeed, she was most likely referring to the fact that he had become an S-rank player through God of Joy. However, in the hearts of his subordinates, was he a martial arts expert or a top player? Just as he was lost in his thoughts, someone knocked on his office door. "Come in." It was Xianxia who sneakily peeked her head in from outside. She carefully sized up Qin Guang's office to see if there was anyone else. Then she flashed in and locked the office door. Looking at Xianxia, who was clearly an adult but was petite and cute, Qin Guang's heart felt a little itchy. If it were in the past, he would definitely have decisively done it first to suppress his shock. They were all adults, and what was done was done. There was no need to be reserved. However, the situation was unclear now. He could not be sure what kind of relationship he had with Xianxia in the new world. If he rashly made a move, with this little girl's personality, she would probably explode. Hurry up. There are many people outside. Let's do something first and then talk. Qin Guang was hesitating. He did not expect that Xianxia, this little girl, would throw away her clothes as she walked and walk forward with a routine tone and gaze. Qin Guang was confused. In the setting of the new world, how did I treat this little girl in the past? Your performance makes you look like a Lolita meat toilet. This, You are. In his heart, Qinguang wondered if he had misunderstood. Could it be that she wanted to cultivate? What are you waiting for? Didn't you practice the true martial arts double cultivation and have to do it every month? I have calculated the time. It has been almost 30 days since you went into seclusion. Do you want to go crazy? Seeing that Qinguang was dilly-dallying, Xianxia actually started to blame him. Qinguang suddenly understood. So that's how it is. Is the old man so shameless in the new setting? How can such a stupid true martial arts double cultivation be made up to deceive people? Besides, how am I hiding from the world? Aren't I staying well in my hometown? I thought you were going to find a mountain to live in seclusion. I didn't expect you to go back to your hometown to comprehend the great Tao with your family. When Master was alive, he once said that a true expert should first enter the world, then come out, and then enter the world. I didn't understand it before, but now I understand. Hurry up. I know you don't have a lover in your hometown. Don't tell me you're tired of me already? Do you want me to call Xiao Miao Miao over? Xianxia said and twisted her delicate body on Qinguang's body with great dissatisfaction. Qinguang thought silently. How could I be tired of you? It's just that you came too directly and abruptly, so I couldn't react. Chapter 12:31. It's nothing. Come on. Xianxia sat up straight and looked straight at him. You seem to be perfunctory? Not interested? Qinguang quickly waved his hand. How can that be? Do you think I'm too small? That I'm too thin? That I don't have any meat on me? Qinguang looked down at her. Although he didn't want to admit it, although he did know that she was an adult, he really felt guilty. In his memory, the first time he had sex with Xianxia was when they were in the slaughtering world on Mount Baylor. There were many coincidences at that time. He wasn't such an immoral person at all. Although he had fantasized about it when he first met her, he didn't really take the initiative to put it into practice. How could I? Absolutely not. Your figure is very, very okay. Then hurry up. Okay. After a long time, Qinguang looked at the computer in front of him in a daze. Xianxia had already packed up and went out. She stayed in the office of the ministry minister for more than 2 hours. As long as the employees outside had an IQ of more than 60, they would know what the two were doing inside. However, no one had any interest in gossiping. Instead, they were used to it and didn't find it strange. It was an open secret in the ministry that the minister and the deputy minister were having an affair. Not only was no one dissatisfied with this unspoken rule in the workplace, but many female comrades in the ministry were envious of the deputy minister's treatment. Unfortunately, the minister was too picky. If there was a chance, they would also like to try the feeling of dual cultivation with the minister. He was the most powerful martial artist in history, born with an innate body with 8 extra meridians unblocked, and his legendary Zhenwu and Zhenwu double cultivation could even help people open up the conception and governing vessels. He was simply a walking walk, okay? Not to mention others, even another deputy minister often complained in private that the minister favored one and discriminated against the other. He was unwilling to help the common people, and would rather let ordinary women who didn't practice martial arts take advantage of them than to generously help those in the pugilistic world who really needed it. The so-called children of the pugilistic world, in ancient times, paid particular attention to quick revenge. In the more open modern society, of course, they would not restrain themselves. Instead, they would be even more indulgent. However, most of the female heroes of Jianghu were too arrogant. Although they had many fellow disciples, it was very difficult for them to enter the eyes of those beautiful female martial sisters who were regarded as the pearl in the palm of each sect. The minister had appeared out of nowhere half a year ago and unified the Jianghu with his unparalleled might. He wiped out the evil sects and killed hundreds of the evil sects in one night. He even killed the mastermind, Ouyang Tianxing, at the peak of Heaven Mountain. At that time, the minister's peerless heroism was deeply rooted in people's hearts, and he became the dream lover of countless female disciples in the Jianghu. Of course, everyone knew that the minister's vision was extremely high. Although ordinary people were eager to try, in front of so many strong competitors, they could only hide their thoughts. Only those who were ranked at the top in terms of appearance among the major sects would have the courage to express their love for the minister. It should be known that when the sects in the Jianghu chose their successors, they usually chose children with outstanding innate talent. Their innate talent was there. When they grew up, even if their looks were ordinary in the sect, they would still be above average when compared to ordinary people. Those female heroes who were ranked at the top in the Jianghu for their beauty were even more top-notch beauties in the outside world. They were the kind that could appear on television without any makeup. It was just like when Xianxia first appeared before Qinguang. Her appearance was so exquisite that it was like a porcelain doll had fallen from the sky. She had shocked old master Yan Kongguang for a long time. In terms of cuteness, there might not be many female heroes in the department who could compare to Xianxia. However, if there was a beauty pageant and they were to be voted, there were quite a few who could compete with Xianxia and Wu Miaowan. Alas, the minister was indeed the strongest in history. He was quite firm. Faced with everyone throwing themselves at him, he maintained a certain level of rationality and explicitly forbade such behavior. Up until now, Deputy Minister Xen was the only one who broke the minister's wall. The others could only sigh in regret. Of course, the thing that really established Qinguang's prestige was not just his looks. After suppressing the evil sects, the chaos of the martial artists caused the people in power to panic. The martial artists of the Jianghu were about to break into a great war with the people in power. When a catastrophe was inevitable, the minister did not hesitate to sacrifice his precious body and personally dealt with 2 old men from the core class of the people in power, resolving the crisis invisibly. It was rumored that he had sacrificed a lot in this matter. He did not even hesitate to use the honey trap. Not only did this news not damage his image, it even made him more respected. What kind of emotion and courage did this require? In short, after this series of very nonsensical facts, Qinguang's reputation in the Heaven Division was now extremely high. Most of it was due to his personal strength, and the other half was due to his charm. Now, what troubled Qinguang the most was that the Guangding General Office was gone. It had become the inexplicable Heaven Division. On the surface, the Heaven Division was just another name for the Guangding General Office, but things were obviously not that simple. Fortunately, the computer in his office had extremely high security clearance. He could look up any information at any time. He pulled out the top secret information one by one and browsed through it at an extremely fast speed. The Heaven Division had been established for a long time, but it was not called that before. It was called the Special Affairs Bureau. The former minister of the Special Affairs Bureau was the evil sect's leader, Ouyang Tianxing. After Qinguang had personally destroyed the evil sect and Ouyang Tianxing, he had personally acted as a bridge between the martial artists and the people in power, eliminating the potential conflict between the martial artists and the people in power, and allowing both sides to truly open their hearts and work together. In the end, under the conditions of mutual agreement, the Special Affairs Bureau was reorganized, and the Heaven Division was born half a year ago. Qinguang became the minister and had been in charge ever since. The initial purpose of the Heaven Division was to provide a place for the martial artists in the world to settle down. At the same time, it was to give them an identity so that the martial artists could regain the identity of ordinary people. This would prevent the evil sect led by Ouyang Tianxing from causing trouble. At the same time, it would satisfy the needs of the martial artists to move from the dark to the light and reintegrate into the new era after the rapid development of technology. Technology was advancing, but the martial artists' skills were mostly inherited from their ancestors. If not for the birth of Qinguang, the martial artists' abilities would have regressed. After reintegrating into society, the major sects could also make use of their strengths and run their own businesses. Whether it was their financial resources or their ability to allocate resources, they were significantly better than before. In order to express their goodwill to the inner force martial artists, the people in power could not help but take care of those who were willing to follow the rules and integrate into society through the power of their sections. Big aristocratic families like the Wen family, which had a lot of history, developed even faster after receiving support. The other small families were doing well too. At least their businesses were doing well. Of course, The martial arts sects that joined the Heaven Division also returned the favor. They sent many of their disciples into the real world to help the Wuxia government solve the problems that ordinary elites could not handle. However, the peace did not last long. About 2 months ago, after a Wuxia scientist captured the god's particle, some special situations that were beyond the common sense of ordinary people but could be explained by modern physics appeared. That's right, the game appeared. Ordinary people did not know about it, but players from all over the world appeared like mushrooms after the rain. There was no sign that an ordinary person would become a player, but the game still had a clear preference when it came to selecting players. Most of the people who were selected were people who had special talents in certain areas. They were either mentally strong in self-training, talented in physical fitness, exceptionally smart, or had high emotional intelligence. In reality, these people were either successful in their careers or had great potential. Even if they looked like ordinary white-collar workers or office workers at the moment, their potential was quite amazing. After ordinary people became players, they would be summoned into the game periodically to undergo various tests. During the completion of the mission or at the end of the mission, they would be rewarded with points that could be used to strengthen their abilities in the game. In addition, every time a player was summoned into the game, their appearance would be reset. Other than the S-rank player Qin Guang, who had voluntarily revealed his identity, no one in the world knew who the other players were. Only players who had signed a contract with each other and communicated with each other in real life could know each other's true identity. Due to the natural territorial nature of humans, players from all over the world quickly formed different large forces in addition to small teams and individual combat modes. Almost all the members of the Heaven Division were awakened. Even without signing a team contract, they naturally became the top team of the Wuxia players. However, in order to eliminate the small number of unawakened members, the Heaven Division also paid a heavy price. 2 awakened ones risked unknown dangers and exposed their identities in public. In the end, they were reset by the game on the spot and lost their identity as players. After that, the ordinary people who were picked out were transferred. Now, the ones who remained here were all genuine players. As for why Qin Guang chose to go into seclusion, it was because of the opposing forces of the human players in the game. The Protoss. Chapter 1232. From the day the game was born, it was the beginning of the competition for resources between the Earthlings and the Protoss. The so-called resources referred to the completion rate of the quest. Each player's contribution in the quest would determine the number of points they would receive in the end. With the exception of a few absolute dragons among men, almost all the human players started at level E. Faced with the Protoss players who were at least level C at the start of the game, the human players were completely suppressed in the corner of the wall, shivering in fear. Every time they entered the game mission, in addition to fighting against the various dangers in the game, the human players also had to guard against the Protoss players. Whether they could survive in the game and make a name for themselves depended not only on themselves, but also on the Protoss players to be merciful and not slaughter the human race. In addition, compared to the scattered human players at the beginning, the Protoss players were stronger and more disciplined. Human players needed to exchange for and sign a team contract before they could form a team. The more members there were in a team, the higher the level of the contract needed and the more reward points needed to exchange for it. So far, the largest human team only had 4 people. Even a large force like the Heaven might not be able to enter the same mission space, even if they agreed on a secret code outside. It was also difficult to form a temporary team inside. In addition, the Heavens Division, with Aunt May and a few other seniors as the core, managed to form a few sharp knife teams, but the number of people could not exceed 4. However, this was also because the seniors had a high starting point. After breaking through the peak of Pai Jin, masters like Aunt May started out as level D players in the game, which was a little easier than ordinary people. In sharp contrast to the human players, the Protoss players acted in a team mode from the beginning. Every time they arrived in a mission space, they could always find other Protoss players as quickly as possible and quickly form a team. Take Yu Ting's team, for example. In addition to Yu Ting, who was suspected to be an level S powerhouse, There were also several level A players, including the Witchweathany, and many more level B and level C players. In the face of such an overwhelming team advantage, the human players had no power to resist at all. They could only struggle at death's door. The Protoss players were extremely domineering in the game. If they disobeyed them, they would kill the humans. Sometimes, even a simple encounter during a mission would cause the humans to be killed. Or, even if they were in a bad mood, they would slaughter humans as they pleased. In the eyes of the Protoss, although humans had the same or similar appearance, they did not treat humans as their own kind. It had been 2 months since the game was created, and the experienced or relatively unlucky players had only experienced 5 quests at most. However, most of them did not get much improvement. Just struggling to survive is already very difficult. As for getting more reward points in the quest to enhance their strength, this is too difficult. Obviously, if the human players couldn't think of a way to change the current situation as time passed, the Protoss would gain an overwhelming advantage, and the humans would have no chance of turning the tables. No one knew why the Protoss cared so much about mission completion and reward points, so much so that they always spared no effort to weaken their competitors, even if they looked weak. No one knew what the game was for, what would happen if they lost, and what would happen if they won. No one even knew what the purpose of the game was, but every player intuitively realized that they had to find a way to reverse the situation. Otherwise, the consequences would be very serious. No one knew what the consequences would be, but they were sure that it would not be good. As for the scientist who discovered the God's particle and caused the game, he was inexplicably crazy. No one knew the reason. What had already happened, and humans could only adapt to this sudden change as quickly as possible. When things were already beyond repair, the people of Earth showed an extraordinary ability to adapt, and they survived in the game with incredible efficiency. Of course, the chosen ones who could not adapt were eliminated and reset as quickly as possible. Those who could survive in the game had no choice. As for the ordinary people who were not chosen, they had no such worries at all. Anyway, they still ate and drank. The sun rose as usual, and the moon was still waxing and waning. Nothing would change. At best, they would only find that someone around them who was already outstanding suddenly became even more outstanding. They stood out in all aspects of life and work. Whether it was in terms of workability or personal temperament, there was an explosive growth trend. In fact, it was these people who became players by chance. Although the reward points obtained in the game could not be directly exchanged for benefits in reality, the physical strengthening of the players in the mission and the training of the mind could be perfectly inherited in real life. No one was born a genius or a success. The hardships experienced in the game made players more mature, their thinking became more agile, and they did things more resolutely. When a person with extraordinary talent became impeccable in terms of temperament, success in reality naturally came naturally. People who were curious would take the initiative to ask them, such as, "How did you do it?" and so on. These people would often come up with all sorts of reasons, such as being well prepared, being suddenly enlightened, getting to know a great person, and so on. In short, they would never mention anything about the game to non-players, or they would be reset. In fact, no one knew that although these people were powerful in real life, in the game, they were simply trembling with fear, treading on thin ice, and living worse than a wild dog hiding in a tree hole. As for the reset that made the players change their expressions, it was the same as Qin Guang's initial guess. It was completely deleted and became a player's memory during this period of time, and then it was replaced by a fictional memory. According to the concept of ordinary people, if a person's memory was tampered with, it was equivalent to becoming a different person. Of course, no one wanted this. At this time, only Qin Guang knew, "Friends, you are really thinking too much. You have become a different person from the beginning." As for Qin Guang's so-called closed-door training, the so-called breakthrough, it was because he, the Minister of Heaven, had stood up when the humans were completely at a disadvantage in this game. When he announced that he would go into closed-door training alone, he, as the Minister of Heaven, had broken through to the peak of B level at the fastest speed among all the players. However, he still could not compete with the Protoss. Before he left, he had declared to the many members of heaven that he would not return until he became an A-level player. In the end, what appeared in front of the world was, "Hi, my God." In the movie, he had used the most direct method to announce to all the players in the world that he had consecutively jumped 2 levels, becoming an S-level player above a level. Although the average strength of the humans was still not a match for the Protoss, at least with him around, the peak strength of the humans was comparable to the Protoss. In the hearts of others, this action of his was equivalent to blowing the horn of counterattack. So, when they saw him return, how could the members of heaven not be ecstatic? Silently turning off the computer in front of him, Chen Guang let out a sigh. After spending an entire day, he had finally seen through the huge pile of top-secret information in front of him. Thanks to his powerful intelligence network, the information also summarized the types and levels of abilities of many members of heaven and ordinary players who had come into contact with the outside world. There was also some statistical information on the Protoss. However, the most important point of all the information was the records of his personal actions. Chen Guang silently wiped away his sweat. This fictional history really gave him a high-end idea. Am I so great? Does it mean that I forcefully carried the hope of the entire human race? A walking, living, visible and touchable savior that should only appear in Hollywood blockbusters? No wonder the power of faith coming from all directions was so strong. Now, every player must have regarded me as their guiding light. I feel that there is a need to continue promoting the true martial dual cultivation to the outside world. I must gather the virgin blood of 72 beautiful female players, cough cough. Although he knew that doing this might really be able to trick the fanatical fans of the players into throwing themselves at him, Chen Guang was not that thick-skinned. After leaving the Heaven Building, Chen Guang drove alone to the headquarters of the Tianguang Group. He felt lucky that his family members did not have any abnormal reactions after reading The God of Joy. There was not a single player among them. This does not seem to be something to be proud of. This only means that the people of the Chen family are all mediocre. Forget it, they are all following me anyway. It doesn't matter if they have it or not. Speaking of which, according to the criteria of selecting players, in the game, there were a few candidates in Chen Guang's mind. Almost all of them were players. But why haven't any of them called until now? Is it because everyone knows that I am in seclusion? Then the news of my return to heaven should have spread. They should have some sort of response, right? Just when Chen Guang was thinking about this, his phone suddenly rang. Lowering his head to take a look, he grinned. As expected, I knew it was you, little Lin. Chen Guang answered the phone. From the other side came Lin Jingwei's voice. He sounded slightly tired. Brother Guang, you are finally out of seclusion. Of course, Earth is still waiting for me to save it. You? We really didn't expect that. When are you coming back to school? Chen Guang pondered over Lin Jingwei's choice of words and thought, we? Could it be that Bai Nyangzi and Xiong'er were also players? Forget about Xiong. After all, he was born with the back of a tiger and the waist of a bear. When it came to martial arts, perhaps Xiong'er could not be compared to Chen Guang, but he was definitely not someone who could be compared to just anyone. But what about Bai Nyangzi? Just based on his incomparably poisonous ability to write deceitful web novels? That's right. Bai Nyangzi's awakening ability must be like this. With a swoosh, he would throw a book at someone's face. Then, the book would expand with the wind and float above the person's head. Large gilded words would fall like raindrops. After hitting the person's head, all sorts of negative buffs would be cast. Stamina -2, IQ -2, EQ -10, mood -100. Chapter 12:33. Thinking about it this way, it seemed like he was quite powerful. The legendary negative buff super support? Thinking about it this way, it seemed like Bai Nyangzi's ability was very powerful. Forget it, I'll find out when I see them later. Thinking about it now is just a waste of time. When Chen Guang arrived at the Tianguang Group, it was already past 11 at night. There were not many people in the headquarters except for a few small fish and shrimp on duty. Seeing him return, the few employees on night duty were first shocked, then their faces lit up. "Boss, why are you back at this time? Do you want us to inform the other bosses?" One of the administrative employees asked. Chen Guang shook his head. "Forget it, it's too late now. Let's talk about it tomorrow. I'll go to my office and rest for a while." Chen Guang waved and turned to walk 2 steps before turning back as if he had thought of something. "Oh, right, in the company. Is there anything unusual recently?" The administrative employee looked confused. He scratched his head and thought for a while before saying, "Something strange happened. Last month, a few people resigned together as if they had agreed on it, but what?" Chen Guang could not help but ask when he saw that he wanted to say something. Now that the company had grown in size, the number of employees had also increased. Now, the total number of employees had unknowingly exceeded 300. People coming and going were common, so there was no need to make a fuss about resignations and new employees. As long as it was not the core backbone, it was not strange for lower-level employees or even middle-level employees to resign. Just like some people whose hometown was elsewhere chose to work at the Tianguang Group after graduation. Although the pay was good, it was inevitable that they would be homesick as a guest in a foreign land. Or they might have a wife who was not from the country, or their husband might be returning to Denghai. Everyone had countless reasons to choose to leave. The employee thought for a while and said, "But in the past few days, most of the people who left previously have expressed that they want to return to work in the company. I don't know what they are thinking." "Oh, right, the company clearly has no plans to recruit people recently, but suddenly a lot of people have come up with ways to work in the company. Many of them don't even want a salary." At this moment, Chen Guang came to a realization. Most of the people that left were players. As for those who wanted to join the Tianguang Group without a salary, there was no need to mention them. They were all newbie players who wanted to ride on his coattails. In Chen Guang's previous memory, ever since the world changed, he had been in charge of the Heavenly Ministry for a long time. He didn't care much about the Tianguang Group. It seemed like the employees who became players at the beginning didn't know what was going on with him. They probably wanted to take a break from work and spend more energy on the game, so they chose to resign. However, they did not expect Chen Guang to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. His boss was truly worthy of being the most talented genius in the world. He had actually become an S-class expert and had even announced his identity to the outside world. Before this, there were indeed countless people who had speculated that if people with extraordinary talents would be selected by the game to become players, then there was no reason for almighty Superman Chen Guang, a super genius who could be number 1 in the world and number 1 in history, to be an undiscovered gem in the vast sea. However, there was no one in the game who could completely suppress everyone else's talent. After the game came, Chen Guang himself was too low-key. Many players could not help but think that perhaps Almighty Bro had displayed too much talent before, causing him to drop the ball at the crucial moment when the game was selecting players. He might not have become a player. It was with this thought that a few players in the Tianguang Group chose to resign, planning to find a way to survive on their own. Of course, it was not that no one had placed their hopes on him. In the history that never happened, the players among the fanatical fans of Almighty Superman had extraordinary confidence in him. They believed that he would definitely stand up and save the day. No one could understand how excited these players and fans were when they saw God of Joy. It was like when the world was dark and life was about to lose all hope, someone had suddenly parted the dark clouds for them, allowing the sun to shine down from the sky. Now that Chen Guang had staged the return of the king, as long as these employees were still sane, they would all want to return to the company. It was reasonable for other casual players to want to join the company. Although being a solo straggler was free and unfettered, the encounters in the game had long since erased the arrogance of these prideful people. So what if they were capable? So what if they were talented? So what if they had great potential? Anyway, they would encounter the Protoss as soon as they entered the game. Even the weakest Protoss was a C-class player. Their attributes, skills, and combat power could be said to be overwhelming. Anyone would lose their drive. Joining the Tianguang Group would mean being under the wing of humanity's only S-class player. Faced with such a temptation, anyone would be tempted. It's okay, I understand. Have they all joined the company? Not yet. Chairman Yu said that the company isn't a market where you can come and go as you please. This matter will have to wait for you to come back and make a decision. Old Yu is right, it should be like this. You go ahead, I'm going to rest. Chen Guang nodded, waved his hand, and returned to his office. If one were to look at it from the perspective of a normal company, Yu Hong's thinking would be that of an administrative department head. Could it be that old Yu had not awakened? Logically speaking, this was not possible, right? Chen Guang prided himself on having a pair of discerning eyes. Putting aside the other people in the company, the 4 great generals were definitely talented people. If the others could become players, there was no reason for Yu Hong to be left behind. Then, could this be a judgment made by Yu Hong as a player? Thinking of this, Chen Guang was a little puzzled. Shouldn't the more players in the company, the better? Forget it, I'll find out when I see the 4 of them tomorrow. Collecting his thoughts, Chen Guang turned on his computer and logged into his top-secret account as the Minister of Heaven to look up information. When he logged into his account outside, the security level was slightly lower than in heaven. There was less information available, and the highest level of top-secret files were missing. But this was not important, because there was only one item in the top-secret file, which was information related to him, the minister. From social relations to whereabouts, it was all there was. To this, Chen Guang could only shrug his shoulders, indicating that he was calm. How could he not know where he was? Heaven had hundreds of members, and the many sects that joined Heaven had more than 100,000 members. Although these people did not have the qualifications to come to the headquarters, nor did they have the qualifications to listen to Chen Guang's lectures, they were still on the Heavens list. The various sects also required the disciples and workers to report any information they gathered. They were not allowed to keep anything to themselves. The range of information was also very wide. This included who or what people or protoss you met in this game mission, what you said, what you did, what abilities the other party displayed, whether you were in a team, whether you formed a temporary team or a contracted team, and so on. Everything was available. Based on this information, Heaven organized and analyzed a lot of useful information. At the moment, there were more than 500,000 human players on the list, but this was definitely a small number. It should be known that among them, just the Heaven and its outer members numbered close to 100,000. In addition, according to the information, it was not only China that had the Heaven. Other countries around the world also had similar official organizations, and they all represented the power of the country. The scale and number of people of these organizations might not be as large as Heaven, but their strength was not to be underestimated. There were close to 7 billion people in the world. Which family did not have a few geniuses? But even if there were so many organizations around the world, people with families were still the minority. Most people were still in the wild. These wild forces were extremely scattered, but their numbers were the largest. They were spread all over the world in small teams, individual experts, and so on. For example, the 2 E-level rookies that Chen Guang met on the bus should be classified as wild players. Although these wild players were the ones who suffered the most losses and performed the worst in every mission, it was hard to guarantee that there would not be some amazing experts among them. For example, another top expert, Wang Lin, who was placed high hopes on by the people of the pugilistic world, had now become a wild player. No one knew where Wang Lin had gone. Ever since the start of the game, there had been no news from her. Her whereabouts were uncertain, and even the Wen family could not contact her. But without a doubt, with Wang Lin's ability, as long as she was not unlucky enough to bump into the muzzle of the Protoss from the very beginning, her growth rate would definitely be much faster than the top team leaders of the Guangding General Headquarters. It was even possible that she had the strength of a C-level right from the start. Other than the large official organizations and wild forces, the information also showed the existence of another very mysterious organization. It was somewhat similar to a religion, but also different. This group of people was considered to be potential members of a religious organization. Although these people did not seem to have organized themselves in a systematic way, according to the analysis of the intelligence personnel of Heaven, as time passed, they would come together sooner or later. This was because these people all had very obvious common characteristics. Their awakened abilities seemed to be of the same origin, and there were great similarities. This was obviously not normal. Everyone might be good at similar things, but the probability of them clashing was too high, so high that it was very strange. So far, Heaven had collected more than 500,000 players' information and conducted a unified summary analysis. Among them, there were 10 types of players' abilities that were suspected of clashing. For example, racing, it was not just cars. In any case, these people's awakened abilities could not be separated from the things that run on land. If they were fighting alone, they might try to get a vehicle from the beginning of the mission. Then, even if they didn't do anything, they could just drive around, run, and hide from people. They could often muddle through until the end of the mission. Even if they didn't get anything, at least they wouldn't die. If they were lucky enough to form a team with others, then it would be amazing. They were simply natural vehicle drivers in the various large teams. If everyone could gather their reward points to exchange for a powerful vehicle, they would be able to bring an entire team to gallop on the battlefield. Their survival rate was extremely high. In addition, there were more than 1,000 people whose abilities were piano. The awakened abilities of these pianists were also not trivial. Even if they were only E-level pianists, as long as they were given a good piano, they could greatly weaken the enemy's strength on the battlefield or increase the combat strength of their own teammates. According to the current statistics, if an E-level pianist played a Steinway piano on a truck controlled by an E-level driver, he could even radiate and restrict the abilities of dozens of D-level players at the same time. There was also a type of player. They were real players who could summon the abilities of a character in a game called Dota in the game. There were also pilots, but these people were very miserable. The reward points needed to exchange for a flying vehicle were too high. There were also microsculptors. There were also dart players. These people were powerful and could often become the main long-range attack force of various teams. There were also some people who had exaggerated arm strength and were called Qilin arms. There were also some people who were particularly good at communicating with people. They could even communicate with small animals in the mission space to obtain information and so on. There were also some people who were particularly good at acting. When they could not get along in the game, they could stand in the corner and act like an exhaust pipe. If someone walked past them, they would not be able to recognize them. The most powerful of these people were the type of people who did not have obvious awakened abilities. However, their physical bodies in the game were extremely tyrannical. Even if they were only E-level, they could withstand several attacks from a C-level Protoss and not die. In short, these suspected ability users covered a wide range of areas. They even overlapped with the members of Heaven. The total number of these people added up to more than 100,000 people. The management of Heaven's intelligence agency gathered these overlapping ability users and asked them how they did it. They were all at a loss. But now, Qin Guang revealed the answer. Damn, isn't this the ability of the old man's 11 statues? In other words, these people might not have been selected to become players, or they might have awakened other abilities. However, because they worshipped the old man's abilities in certain areas, when they were selected to become players, they were tacitly chosen to be the target audience of the old man's statues? I don't know what's going on, but this is very much like a cult. Don't I have 11 statues? Why are there only 10 abilities radiated out? Oh, damn, luckily my pile driver was not trained in the real world. Otherwise, I don't know how many people I would have killed. Speaking of which, in this game system, the performance of the world's 4 major religions was not very good. There was actually no organized formation of players. In fact, they were not even as good as the old man's statues. Forget it, this is not important. Chapter 12:34. Turn off your phone and go to sleep. The next morning, Yu Hong and the rest of the Qinguang group's 4 great generals heard that Qin Guang had finally returned to the company. They did not dare to be careless and waited outside Qin Guang's office early in the morning. As the boss of such a large company, Qin Guang's office was well equipped with facilities in the break room. Stretching his body on the 3-meter bed, Chen Guang leisurely got up and washed up. When he was done cleaning up, he opened the door to his office and was about to order some breakfast. However, he saw the 4 great guardian warriors standing outside looking at him. "Boss, you're back." Lu Xiaoyang reacted the fastest. He appeared in front of Chen Guang almost as soon as he opened the door and greeted him respectfully. The other 3 rolled their eyes when they saw Lu Xiaoyang take the lead again. However, they were not slow and their attitude was quite on point. Chen Guang wanted to go downstairs, but since the 4 of them were already there, he had to make things clear first. Therefore, he waved his hand and said, "Come in. It looks like you guys have a lot to talk to me about." The 4 of them wanted to say something after entering the door but stopped. Chen Guang waved his hand first. "Let's talk about the company first. I heard some things last night and I need you guys to tell me more in detail." When the 4 of them heard Chen Guang's words, they instantly understood that Yu Hong was the first to report the company's recent developments to Chen Guang. Although the world had changed, Tianguang Group was doing quite well. It seemed to be even better than in the old world. Apart from the businesses that Chen Guang had developed in the past, Tianguang Culture, which was a subsidiary of the company, not only had Jin Shiyue and Jiang Yage, but also dozens of first-rate, second-rate, and third-rate artists in the country. There were even more trainees. Unlike the old world where China's entertainment industry was completely dominated by Europe and America, thanks to China's strong national strength in the New World, the Chinese language was very popular around the world. It even seemed to surpass English. The influence of China's A-list and super-list artists overseas could not be underestimated. Tianguang Culture's market value had reached tens of billions just from the management contracts of some of the top artists. In addition, unlike in the old world, where Tianguang Media had many IP resources that had yet to be developed, in the New World, the company perfectly integrated Tianguang Culture's artist resources with Tianguang Media's IP resources, making the development of the company's resources extremely smooth. Apart from the current global hit variety show Hi! My God! In addition, the Tianguang Group was behind many popular TV shows and movies in the world. Of course, the main resources of the company's headquarters were still poured into Qinguang, and they went all out to develop the valuable assets left by Chen Guang. Everything he had done in the past was an IP that the company could develop. Every image he left behind could be extended to many variants of IP addresses. For example, the miracle he had left on the Hong Kong racetrack had even been adapted into a movie, which had been completed and was about to be released. The male lead was the company's A-list top star. Of course, he could not be the kind of fresh meat who had no acting skills. He had to be a well-known actor who was slightly older than Chen Guang's actual age. In addition, the piano recordings he had played had already been sold all over the world after obtaining the piano music copyright. Women, which had just been screened in North America, could still generate tens of millions of yuan in profits every day in other continents around the world. The market derived from the audiovisual materials and copyrights was even wider. It was simply a money-making machine. In addition, some of the pencil microcarvings that Chen Guang had left behind had been placed in many museums around the world. As many people went to visit them, the rentals of these works of art were not free, and they were also generating profits. The Wuxia Darts Academy, which was jointly funded by Tianguang Group and Xinqian's Qinjue sect, had also been officially operating. There were branches in major cities all over the country, and they were only free of charge for talented students. If ordinary people wanted to learn, they would have to pay the tuition fees themselves. Successful students had 2 choices. They could consider joining the Qinjue sect, or they could develop in the direction of professional darts. Even if they chose neither, at least they would have an additional skill that seemed useless in life, but would be like a fish in water when they entered the game. Well, you've done a good job. I'm very satisfied. After listening to Yu Hong's report, Chen Guang nodded with satisfaction. No wonder the rich often got richer, and it was harder for the poor to make a comeback. Wasn't this the reason? When the accumulation of personal wealth and resources had reached a certain level, he didn't need to spend too much energy. He only needed to make a decision on a big decision, and he could get rich without doing anything. Tianguang Group was not like an ordinary listed company. There were no equity disputes, and there was no fear of market turbulence. He could completely sit back and relax. After that, Fang Tianyu and Lu Xiaoyang also reported on the internal and external affairs that they had been in charge of recently. In fact, it was not that Qin Guang had become interested in managing the company. He was just curious. In the old world, the two of them had been busy with women in Europe and the United States. Qin Guang had only returned a little earlier. After listening to the two of them, Qin Guang could not help but applaud the perfect fusion of the old world and the new world. The two of them had been in the United States and back at the same time as in the old world. Whether Qin Guang was in seclusion or not did not affect the two of them from fulfilling their duties. Be it the screening of women, the copyright operation of the drama Romeo and Juliet, or the overseas promotion of the variety show High God, the two of them had not missed a single one. They had done more than what Qin Guang had requested and more than what they should have done. For example, as the head of the Public Relations and Publicity Department, Lu Xiaoyang could lie down and do nothing under normal circumstances if he did not want to manage things. However, he had never been idle. In fact, he did not even need Qin Guang to make arrangements for him. He could find Qin Guang's needs and take the initiative to do things. For example, during the movie's release period, Tianguang Group's product output would also be accompanied by the extension of Qin Guang's personal brand. In that case, they had to pay attention to the public opinion regarding Qin Guang. Where there were people, there would be people, and where there were people, there would be benefits. If Qin Guang's Tianguang Group wanted to obtain more benefits, it would inevitably occupy the space of others. Just like the movie market, the logic seemed simple. If a movie was filmed well, there would naturally be attendance. If there was attendance, there would naturally be showtimes, and there would naturally be box office sales. It could only be said that the above logic was too simple. It was the same everywhere in the world. There were only so many cinemas, and the audience only had 24 hours a day. If one movie occupied a high number of showtimes, the other one would naturally have a low number of showtimes. There were countless similar situations. Therefore, even though Qin Guang's reputation were at its peak, those who disliked him or felt that they had a conflict of interest with him had always thought of ways to discredit him. Otherwise, it was impossible to know a person's heart. There were 1,000 Hamlets in 1,000 people's eyes. A person could never be liked by everyone at the same time. Master Fan had once said that the amount of praise one could take was the amount of slander one could take. In other words, there were as many people who liked him as there were people who hated him. Perhaps there were more people who liked him, but it was undeniable that there were still people who hated him. Especially now that China was powerful in the New World, and the influence of Chinese stars was even greater. Correspondingly, there were more overseas fans than in the Old World, and there were also many overseas haters. The fighting power of the imported haters was not inferior to that of the domestic haters. In the past 2 months, Lu Xiaoyang had been busy enough. He had almost died from overwork. If not for, all right, that's all I know about the company's regular business. By the way, I heard that a lot of people resigned some time ago, but recently they wanted to be reinstated. Then, many people submitted their resumes to our company at almost the same time. They even wanted to work without pay. What do the four of you think about this? Finally, Qin Guang got straight to the point. As he spoke, he also looked at the four's expressions. At the moment, he was not sure if all four of them had awakened as players. He could only test the waters first. Qin Guang was not afraid of being punished by the game. He had no secrets now. However, he had another worry. He was said to be an S-rank player, and his attributes were too strong. If ordinary people heard about it, it would cause them to have their memories reset. Wouldn't that be a scam? The four Vajras looked at each other. They could read from each other's eyes that a huge burden had been lifted from their hearts. This time, it was Yu Hong's turn to speak. Boss, those who resigned were all players. Those who submitted their resumes were also players. Yu Hong did not hide his words from the other three people. Qin Guang grinned. So, it seems that the four of you are also players? Yes, boss. That's right. Lu Xiaoyang said, Boss, we are very strong. Fang Tianyu said, Boss? Dog 3's awakened ability is transformation. Qin Guang was very curious. He had never seen a transformation ability before. Transformation into what? Fang Tianyu chuckled. Three-headed Pekingese. Lu Xiaoyang was furious. Go to hell. What do you know? My ability is called the infant three-headed hellhound. Chapter 12:35. So scary, so scary. Even my sister's poodle at home is louder than you. Let's not talk about your teeth. We asked you to bite the weakest monster, but you almost beat it into a husky. If we didn't save you in time, you would have died on the spot. Fang Tianyu was not afraid of the angry Lu Xiaoyang at all. He was still very arrogant. Believe it or not, I will bite you to death. Lu Xiaoyang turned around and looked at him fiercely. It seemed he would pounce on Fang Tianyu and bite him. Su Li suddenly said, Fang Tianyu, stop mocking Lu Xiaoyang, you lighter. At least the three Pekingese can do some scouting in the mission. You're the one who's completely useless. Right? When I fight, at least I can bite people. When I have nothing to do, I can transform myself to spy on the situation. Although my three heads don't look very elegant, they can see everything and hear everything. Your stupid lighter can only be used to light a fire when people are hungry and want to eat barbecue. I am not bragging, but I have learned how to survive in the wild. Even without you, I can still make fire by drilling wood. It is obvious that you, Fang Tianyu, are just like a fire stick. Damn, I will burn you to death. I will bite you to death. Yu Hong couldn't stop the two people who were about to fight with each other. Finally, Chen Guang coughed slightly, and the two people quieted down immediately. Enough. Both of you, shut up. The eldest brother has as many pockmarks on his face as the second brother. Oh, by the way, there is something I am very interested in. Everyone else, shut up. Let me tell you. Hearing Chen Guang's order, Buttface and Fang Tianyu finally quieted down. However, they still looked at each other with annoyance. Chen Guang didn't know what to do with these two enemies. Then he turned around and looked at Yu Hong. Yu Hong lowered his head and coughed awkwardly. He felt quite embarrassed. Boss, you can ask me anything. I am the leader of our team. Basically, I know everything. Well, according to what you said, the four of you are in a team, right? Did you guys get 4 team contracts? Chen Guang was very surprised. Didn't the data show that there were at most 3 people in a human team? Does this mean that these 4 fellows silently walked to the front of everyone? So awesome? Could the old man's Tianguang group produce such a talent? This time, the way Chen Guang looked at the 4 of them was worth pondering. It was as if he was appreciating their potential. It was the old man who was rash. The old man had underestimated you. That boss, this matter is very strange. We also know about the existence of the party contract. Everyone else has to sign the contract before they can be assigned to the same mission every time. According to the statistics of some of the core members of the company, there have been at least hundreds of different game spaces. But we seem to have completely violated this rule. We are always together, but the others are not like this. Yu Hong explained further. Chen Guang pondered for a moment. This matter is a little strange, but it's already an established fact. There's no need to keep dwelling on it. Boss, you are wise. Fang Tianyu raised his arms and shouted decisively. Chen Guang and the others turned around and looked at him. Chen Guang couldn't help but say, Fang Tianyu, your flattery is a little embarrassing, isn't it? I'm just spouting nonsense. Fang Tianyu laughed. A little bit, a little bit. Chen Guang asked again. By the way, you said that there are other players in the company? How many are there in total? Yu Hong was still handling this matter. There are about 20 to 30 registered players, but I guess it's definitely more than that. There are more than 30 people who resigned and want to be reinstated. Boss, you know that we can't let ordinary people know that we are players easily. So it's very difficult to determine whether they are players or not. Okay, I got it. I'll handle it later. First, tell me about your awakened abilities. The 4 of them said one after another. Lu Xiaoyang was indeed a 3-headed hellhound in the transformation department. The baby in his mouth did look like a Pekingese, but according to him, his awakened ability had a lot of room for growth. If he was lucky enough to live to S level, the real three-headed hellhound in golden armor would be born. At that time, his body would be bigger than a mammoth. It was said that he could run as fast as lightning, and his claws and fangs could even break gold and stones. It was said that when he reached the peak, he could also master the ultimate ability of the Demon Clan, the legendary space travel skill. As for Feng Tianyu, he was insulted by others as a lighter just now. His ability was called Flame Spirit. It was said that when he became powerful, he could turn his whole body into flames and be completely immune to physical attacks. The higher the level of the ability, the higher the temperature of the flames and the wider the coverage. As a veteran who had watched the One Piece cartoon, Chen Guang pointed at Feng Tianyu and gave him a new nickname, Ice Feng Di, Mud Howl. However, Feng Tianyu felt that Chen Guang's statement was biased. He always believed that he was a noble high elf, and he even added the title of prince. He also insisted that somewhere outside the game, there was a kingdom waiting for him to inherit, and he would become the legendary Flame Spirit King. Su Li's ability was not as external as Feng Tianyu's and Lu Xiaoyang's. Even if he used it, no one would know. Su Li's work in the real world had given him an extremely strong logical thinking ability. In the game, his ability in this aspect was displayed to the extreme. However, it wasn't a simple analysis. Instead, he was able to intuitively see through the situation in front of him, from the ways of the world to the changes in the environment, and predict what would happen next. Right now, he was only at level E, so he could only foresee what would happen 1 minute later. However, this was already quite terrifying for a game mission. This was also the main reason why the 4 of them could survive the game without any injuries from the very beginning, even though they were only at level E, and they could see level D right in front of them. It was said that if he was promoted to S level, he could even predict what would happen 1 day later in the game. This would make him invincible. In addition, Yu Hong's ability seemed to have the least combat power, but everyone agreed that this was the most bug-like ability. Even Yu Hong himself could not stand it. Players could spend reward points in the game to buy items or upgrade their abilities. For example, upgrading from E level to D level required 20 reward points. However, Yu Hong's ability was very strange from the beginning. It was very similar to the ability of a capable minister in the glorious 3 Kingdoms. The explanation card stated that through a more reasonable and detailed distribution, he could spend less reward points in the shop. Yu Hong himself did not know how detailed this so-called detailed distribution was, but the effect was obvious. Now, if he were to spend it in the shop, for example, from E level to D level ability enhancement, the original price would be 20, and the current price would be 10% off, and it would only be 18. You would not be fooled by 18 yuan, and you would not suffer a loss if you bought it. Ahem. In short, if Yu Hong could reach S level, he would be able to spend a terrifying 50% off. If there was a boss behind the shop system, he would tremble at the sight of Yu Hong. This was simply terrifying. Many a little makes a mickle. Just this ability of Yu Hong's was enough to develop an entire team. After listening, Chen Guang pretended to be calm, waved his hand and said, "That's it for today. I will think of something later. You guys go ahead." After understanding the situation, Chen Guang said goodbye to the 4 of them. He was a little hungry, so he decided to go and have breakfast first. When he went downstairs, he thought to himself, "My 4 King Kongs are all ruthless characters." Although these 4 guys looked like noobs now, their ability combination was really a natural big team boss level. In addition, it seemed that this so-called game space had been modified. In the game setting of the killing mission, players did not have abilities when they were E level. After the first enhancement, they would become D level, and then they would have different abilities. But now, it seemed that everyone was given an initial ability when they first entered the game. Players did not have the right to choose freely. This was both a good and a bad thing. There was basically no change in the price level. It seemed that to upgrade from D level to C level, they would have to prepare at least 2,000 points. In addition, with the intelligence and ability of this team of 4, they had gone through a total of 4 game missions so far, and yet they had not accumulated 18 points per person. It was simply unbelievable. Chen Guang did not experience the current game mission himself. He could only guess that after the modification, the difficulty of the game had decreased, and at the same time, the rewards had been weakened to a certain extent. It was very difficult for players to improve their abilities. In short, it was the first game mission that he personally led a team to experience. It should be the legendary super difficult version of the game. The rewards were generous, and the difficulty was exaggerated. If it wasn't for him, not to mention the human race, even the Protoss led by Yu Ting would have been wiped out. It sounded like it was very powerful, but how strong could the old man, who was now an S level, be? While stuffing fried dough sticks into his mouth, Chen Guang could not help but complain to himself. Am I already abnormal? Why am I suddenly looking forward to the game mission? No, this is an illness, I have to treat it. Speaking of treatment, what has Sister Tang Ying been busy with recently? Chapter 12:36. It was rare for him to take the initiative to call Tang Ying, but it was an empty number. Chen Guang was baffled. He had no idea what was going on. Maybe Tang Ying had changed her number after the world integration, but he couldn't follow up on it? Or maybe she had changed her number on purpose to focus on her work because the Biology Research Institute that she created with Moorlens and Gokyo University had officially started operating. However, based on Chen Guang's understanding of Tang Ying, if all 4 of Tianguang Group's leaders could awaken and become players, then there was no reason for her to fall behind. So, as long as she became a player, it was impossible for her to remain unmoved after reading the 4th episode of God of Joy. But why didn't she contact him? Forget it, she must have her own reasons. If it really didn't work out, he could go to the police station to look for Sister Wu Tong. The two of them were best friends, so he couldn't possibly not contact her. Also, he could observe Sister Wu Tong's current situation. Maybe she was also implicated. After making up his mind, Chen Guang focused his attention back on the players in Tianguang Group. According to Yu Hong's description, there should be more than 50 players in the company. There were 300 employees in the company, and more than 50 players. Chen Guang was stunned. The number of players was way too high. He could only hope that it was a coincidence. If it was a common occurrence, then it would be really scary. After breakfast, Chen Guang didn't return to the company, but went straight to school. An hour later, Chen Guang, Sun Xiaoxuan, Lin Jingwei, Bai Fan, Xiong'e, and Gao Ye met up in the woods by the Yuanming Lake. Chen Guang was mentally prepared that his 3 best friends could awaken and become players, but he didn't expect Sun Xiaoxuan and Gao Ye to be involved as well. This was unexpected. That was not the end of it. When these people entered the mission space, they were in the same situation as the 4 people from the Tianguang Group. In fact, it was even more exaggerated. Because there were 5 of them, they were always assigned together when they entered the mission space without signing a team contract. In addition, the 5 of them displayed amazing talent in the game. The average strength of the 5 of them was even stronger than the 4 King Kongs, and Sun Xiaoxuan's initial ability was D rank. No one expected that the gentle and modest Sun Xiaoxuan's awakened ability would be so explosive and destructive. In the game, when her ability was activated, she could turn anything she touched into a bomb and throw it out. This was not the most abnormal part. What was even more abnormal was that this ability of hers had a crushing effect on low-level phantom beasts. When she faced an E-level phantom beast, not only was she not afraid of it, she could even turn it into a bomb and explode on the spot. With her ability, the 5-man team had once dealt with a group of E-grade phantasmal beasts that even a C-grade Protoss player would have to think twice before dealing with. Then, with Sun Xiaoxuan's explosive skills, they forcefully withstood the attack of the large wave of phantasmal beasts. The team had gained a lot, and now all of them were D rank. Lin Jingwei's ability was that of an elemental magician who could control the water element. After reaching D rank, he had grasped 2 spells. One of them was an advanced skill similar to Frost Shock, which could reduce the speed of an enemy and deal a small amount of damage. The other was his basic skill, Moisturizing Rain. As the name suggested, this was a healer skill that healed and healed. In the beginning, Lin Jingwei rejected it. After all, his dream was to become a military advisor who could command the army and command the country with vigor. When he found out that he was actually a legendary water magician, he was a little disappointed, but it was not unacceptable. In fantasy novels, there were often powerful forbidden spells in water magic, such as 1,000 Miles of Ice or Water Dragon's Roar. But he never thought that he would become a shameful battlefield healer. Bear 2's ability was the legendary Beast transformation. When it used its ultimate move, the muscles on its entire body would swell, and it would become extremely powerful. It would be invulnerable to swords and spears, and it would also have a ferocious appearance. According to Xianxia's ability, if he could reach S rank, he would have the chance to transform into a real Hellscream Grom. With a Bloodhowl battle axe, he would be able to cut down anyone he saw. As for Bai Fan, there was no need to mention him. This guy had actually awakened a talent for writing. He was really a vicious witch doctor on the battlefield, a walking source of negative buffs and viruses. Anyone who saw him would be annoyed. Elegance's ability was quite in line with her personality. The legendary Wounded Sword Demon was outstanding because she could fight and carry. She only had one sword at the start, and her equipment depended on fighting. The more heavily injured she was, the stronger her attack and defense would be. If she could be stuck in a near-death state, the E-rank Elegance could even fight a C-rank Protoss player. Of course, if she was really a lone ranger, once she was in a near-death state, she would basically die. But she had a team, and there was a healer in the team, Lin Jingwei. The two of them were a perfect match. When their team of 5 fought against thousands of E-rank phantom beasts, they relied on Elegance to hold the fort in front. Xiong, transformed into an orc warrior to help from the side. Bai Fan frantically wrote and poisoned books in the back, and Lin Jingwei leaned against the wall and madly used rain to nourish Elegance. Cough, cough. The most important task of killing was handed over to Sun Xiaoxuan. She first turned everything she could throw into bombs and let Elegance and Xiong throw the dead or half-dead phantom beasts over. She wiped her hand on them, and after throwing them out, they were still bombs. After listening to the 5 of them talk about their experiences in the game, Qin Guang did not know what to say. He was speechless for a long time. Why did it feel like their lives were more thrilling and exciting than his? In addition, the speed of their growth was a little too fast. They actually adapted to the game so quickly and formed a super strong team with clear tactical thinking, clear division of labor, and seamless cooperation. Everyone's ability was brought into play. Even if they encountered a lone C-rank Protoss, there was no need to be afraid. Ordinary people really did not have this ability. I say, you guys suddenly got involved in this kind of thing. Why don't you know fear? Chen Guang could not help but ask. Sun Xiaoxuan leaned beside him and looked at him strangely. Why should we be afraid? It's not like we're the only players. There are so many players in the world. Lin Jingwei also said, Brother Guang, you haven't paid attention to a piece of news before, right? Qin Guang asked, What news? What happened in Area 51 is actually true. Area 51? The place where the aliens are locked up in America? Chen Guang thought for a while to make sure he did not hear wrong. In the old world, of course, he knew the legend of Area 51, but he was not sure if it existed in the New World. He did not know much about the New World before. Besides, wasn't China the strongest country in the New World? If there was a country in the world that could obtain and keep it, and even decipher the secrets of alien technology, wouldn't China be the most reliable? Lin Jingwei nodded. But the Area 51 that the people know is actually a cover. The specific location of the real alien technology base in the United States is even more secretive. A few years ago, we couldn't even confirm if it existed. It was only when one of our high-level spies was exposed last year that we received a definite answer at the last moment. Many people in China find it strange. With our nation's diligence and creativity, we only needed 30 to 40 years to lead the world in ancient times. But now that the new China has been established for nearly 90 years, we still haven't been able to leave Europe and America in the dust. This is very abnormal. Chen Guang raised his eyebrows. Although he felt that what Lin Jingwei said made sense, as someone who knew the evolution of the old world, he had the urge to beat someone up. You make it sound so easy, you nationalistic egomaniac. But what does this have to do with the game? Actually, this is all my personal speculation. I think this matter is the same as the Tesla accident more than 100 years ago. It's really an accident when Area 51 was developing alien technology. Actually, with your authority, Brother Guang, you can also access the information. It's just that you might be too busy to read it. Before the game came, according to our monitoring, there was a violent earthquake in the Central Plains of the United States. The intensity exceeded 7.5. Almost at the same time, our country's researchers discovered the God particle, and then, the game came. And then, Chen Guang smacked his lips. He felt that little Lin's act of thinking that he had seen through everything, but in fact, it was all nonsense. It was very amusing. Lin Jingwei continued, so we have reason to believe that this should be the manifestation of another energy form in the universe. The appearance of players among humans should mean that we are forced to begin the next step of evolution, from a material life form to a spiritual life form. I also speculate that the reminder to reset when you die in the game should be erasing your memories as a player, but it's not a true death. Chen Guang immediately looked at him in a different light. Although this young man was making wild guesses, he actually managed to come up with a correct point of view in the end. He nodded. That's right. Lin Jingwei was overjoyed. Brother Guang, you think so too? You're an S-level player, so you should have more information than me, right? Chen Guang shook his head first, then nodded. It's not that I think so, but it's the truth. Resetting does not mean true death, but I'm not sure if a player can enter the game again after their identity is taken away. I still have to think about this. That's right, then why should we be afraid? You're looking down on us too much. Gao Ye, who was beside them, still had a bad temper and spoke rudely. Ahem, Gao Ye, don't be like this. Chen Guang doesn't mean any harm. Sun Xiaoxuan tried to persuade her. Gao Ye rolled her eyes and didn't say anything else. In her mind, she was cursing Sun Xiaoxuan for not giving up on Chen Guang. They then asked Chen Guang about his experience in the game. After all, he was the legendary S-level player. If they could know his growth, it would be very helpful. But the truth was that Chen Guang didn't have any experience. Even with the slaughtering world, he didn't get any substantial improvement. However, the background setting of the new world had set a tone for him. He had a closed-door training that didn't exist. Left with no choice, Chen Guang could only lie. When I fell off the cliff, I thought I was going to die. I didn't expect to see a crystal skeleton at the bottom of the cliff. Crystal skeleton? That's right. The energy in a powerhouse's body is too pure, so their bones crystallize. After they die, they become crystal skeletons. Then, I benefited from the inheritance left by this powerhouse and leveled up from sea level to B level. Then, I entered an endless sea, and I was sucked into a whirlpool in the depths of the sea. Therefore, you wouldn't know if you didn't try. Chen Guang's bragging had fooled the five of them. Only then did he realize how good he was at bragging. They really believed him. The six of them chatted in school for the whole day. They looked forward to the future and summarized their experiences. However, Chen Guang didn't consider forming a team with them. The situation was complicated. Chen Guang didn't have any reward points. With their inventory, they could only exchange for 3 team contracts at most. If Chen Guang formed a team with 2 of them, the other 3's original team system would be broken. The next time they entered the game space, they would be alone. In that case, they might as well not form a team at all. In the afternoon, Chen Guang left Gokyo University and went straight to the city. Along the way, his mind was a mess. It was really strange. Most of the people who were close to him had mysteriously become players, and they even mysteriously had a party bug. Compared to other players, this was simply breaking the balance. But what was even stranger was that none of his family members who were close to him had any reaction. What was the cause of this? When he saw Wu Tong, the thought in his mind became even stranger. That's right. Sister Wu Tong and Sister Tang Ying had become a team. Chen Guang looked down at his hands. Am I the legendary source of the influenza virus? Isn't my influence too strong? Everyone close to me has entered the game? That's right. The player rate of Tianguang Group is also ridiculously high. Maybe this is the reason. Chapter 1237. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. This new discovery made him uneasy, and in Wu Tong's eyes, he seemed a little distracted. At this time, the two of them were in Wu Tong's office. Wu Tong had been in the position of director for some time now. The longer she was away from frontline posts, the stronger her official aura became. Whether she was willing or not, this was a fact that could not be changed. Perhaps, only when she was alone with Chen Guang could she find a little of the past. Wu Tong straightened her uniform, propped her chin with her hand, and lay her whole body on the desk. She did not rush Chen Guang, but just looked at him happily in a daze. Chen Guang's heart was completely lost, and he was completely immersed in his own world. First of all, although everyone was considered a genius, their performance in the game was a little too strong. Compared to the difficult start of the ordinary players, their start was simply too smooth. They had a team effect, and their initial ability values were relatively high. Not only did they exist in the form of a team, but the distribution of their awakened abilities was also quite scientific and reasonable. This definitely had something to do with his influence. There was only one explanation. In the old world, these people were too closely connected to him, and their fate formed a mysterious connection with him. When the worlds merged and the new world descended, the strong connection between them and himself allowed them to form a complete team with each other. They were more likely to become players, and because of the strong connection between them in real life, they would form a team effect. This was obviously very unfair to other players, but when he thought about it again, compared to the Protoss players who formed teams and organizations from the beginning, this seemed quite reasonable. After all, there was no harm if there was no comparison. The Protoss players were even more abnormal. Here was the problem. Once Chen Guang realized that he was the legendary source of infection, he had two choices in front of him. He could either find ways to continue spreading his influence, so that more ordinary people would be influenced by him and become players, and further strengthen the human players in the game, or he could try his best to restrain his influence in the future to prevent more ordinary people from being involved in this matter, which he did not know whether it was good or bad. Both choices had their own reasons, and Chen Guang didn't know what to do. If he wanted to strengthen the strength of the humans in the game, he should spread his influence and influence more powerful players. However, those who could truly survive in the game and grow rapidly were the cream of the crop. Allowing more ordinary people to enter the game might not necessarily be a good thing for them. If they were to be sent to their deaths at the beginning, it might even be disadvantageous. What should he do then? In addition, Chen Guang was also considering whether to let the five-man team from Tianguang Group and Gokyo University merge into the Ministry of Heaven, but now he changed his mind. If they were to rashly pull these people into the Heaven Division's team, it might destroy their originally stable team system. After thinking about it, he decided to take a risk and temporarily let everyone stay outside of Heaven Division, allowing them to develop freely. Of course, he could also use his authority to give them some extra convenience. He could give them a random name and open up the Heaven Division's intelligence and reinforcement system to them. This way, everyone would be able to enjoy the Tian Division's resources without any obvious changes to their identities. However, Chen Guang still had to convince the masses. So if they were to enjoy the Tian Division's resources, they would naturally have to make appropriate contributions. For example, if there was a member of Heaven Division who needed help in the game, they would have to lend a helping hand if the conditions allowed. Other than that, if they met a relatively weaker member of Heaven Division in the game, they should also consider adding them into the temporary team to help them grow. However, they might not be willing. In the game, everyone had their own judgment, and Chen Guang couldn't even be sure if his decision was really suitable for them. Perhaps they would think that developing alone was more beneficial? If Chen Guang had really grown from C to S rank, then he might have 100% confidence in his judgment, but now, even he wasn't sure if he was right or wrong. Would it really be better to let them develop freely? Look at your melancholy face. Those who don't know would think that you owe someone tens of billions of dollars. Wu Tong, who was beside him, finally spoke. She patted him on the shoulder. "What are you worried about?" Chen Guang sighed and turned to look at her. He asked, "Sister Wu Tong, you said that you and Sister Tang Ying bumped into each other in the game. What exactly happened?" Wu Tong chuckled. "Come to think of it, it was strange. At that time, both Mai and Shadow Lady's appearances changed completely, but our figures didn't change much. We were big when we should be big and small when we should be small." As Wu Tong spoke, she deliberately puffed out her chest. Chen Guang coughed lightly. "Ahem, let's get down to business." Alright. Actually, the two of us didn't recognize each other at first, but we didn't know each other. Not long after we escaped together, I felt that the other party's gaze and tone of voice were quite right. So, when we were alone, I revealed my identity first. As soon as I opened my mouth, she immediately admitted it. Chen Guang couldn't help but admire Wu Tong's decisiveness. However, it was also in line with her personality. She was always so unreasonable. To put it bluntly, she was lacking a brain. I thought that you would become more sophisticated after being in the government for a long time, but you're still so straightforward. Are you complimenting me or scolding me? It's true that I have to be more mature in life, but in that game, no one knows that I'm Chief Wu. Why do I have to hide it and wear a mask all the time? Won't I die of exhaustion? You see, many people on the internet are full of tricks when it comes to scolding others. Don't you think he's the same in real life? Just a while ago, the netizen who insulted the police was personally arrested by my subordinates. Who would have thought that the brat would shout louder than anyone on the internet all day long? In the end, he turned out to be a frustrated white-collar worker. Everyone in his company said that he was honest. You can't judge a book by its cover. Chen Guang didn't expect Wu Tong to divert the topic. When it came to her anecdotes about her work, he pulled the topic back. "By the way, what's your and Sister Tang Ying's ability? Speaking of which, it's strange. My and Sister Tang Ying's ability?" Wu Tong seemed to want to say something but stopped. Chen Guang was at a loss. "What's wrong? Is it inconvenient for you to tell me?" Wu Tong's face suddenly turned red as if she had made up her mind. "Forget it. I can't hide it from you, but you have to promise me that you won't tell anyone else." "What are you talking about? It's like it's some big deal." When Wu Tong finished speaking, Chen Guang's mouth was wide open for a long time. Wu Tong and Tang Ying's awakened abilities left him speechless. Before the two of us met each other, it was really frustrating. I couldn't fight at all. I even had a D rank rating, but I couldn't use it at all. The description of my ability was also vague. I wanted to try triggering the player's innate ability like others, but nothing happened. There was even one time when I was chased by an E-rank player and almost died in his hands. Chen Guang was surprised. "No way? Do human players kill each other?" Wu Tong curled her lips and looked at Chen Guang in surprise. "Looks like I have to get to know you again. Why didn't I realize that you were so stupid and naive? Weren't you a bad kid? Why did you think that human players would really be a loving family?" Chen Guang chuckled. "I thought that with a common enemy like the Protoss, humans would be able to put down their grudges and work together. You think too much. There are so many players, and no one wants to be the one who gets eliminated. Even if it's just 1 point, they have to fight for it. Not to mention that everyone has a different identity in the game. As long as they can vent their negative emotions, who can be detached from the world? There's a little demon living in everyone's heart. I know that, but I didn't expect. Forget it. Let's get back to you and Sister Tang Ying's ability." Chen Guang smiled bitterly and shook his head. It wasn't that he was naive, but he vaguely knew the truth of this game. In addition to self-defense, the most important task for players in the game was not to complete the quest, defeat the phantom beasts, and pass the test. The real theme should be to suppress the Protoss in the quest. Now that the Protoss were much stronger than humans, if humans did not work together, they would not be able to make a comeback. However, the current situation was that Chen Guang understood this logic, but others did not know that they were facing a game. Therefore, other than the Heavens, who had a strong sense of social responsibility, there should be quite a number of people who treated this matter as a game. At that time, I hated that guy to the core, but there was nothing I could do. He had a high level but no combat power. Later, after I escaped and returned to the main group, I talked to the shadow girl and found out that she had the same problem. Then, when the two of us faced each other, I realized that our abilities had to be combined to be effective. Huh? There's such a setting? Yin and yang balance? Screw you, both of them are yin, there's no yang. Wu Tong pushed Qin Guang, but then changed the topic. But then again, it seems that your understanding is correct. Have you heard of humanoid weapons? I've seen them in cartoons before, ship girl. You can think of it that way. Anyway, my ability is called Activator, and your sister Tang Ying's is called Mutant. What is a mutant? After the Activator activates their superpowers, their entire body will recombine and mutate into a weapon. Weapon? Right now, it's a broadsword about 3 feet long. If we rank it according to the player's ability, it's probably a weapon with destructive power between D and C grade. What about you? My mission is to use this broadsword that the Shadow Girl has transformed into to slay demons. There's such a thing? Then this is called fusion. It's not wrong to call it fusion. Anyway, when I wield the Crimson Shadow Sword, I'm very strong. We once fought with a C-grade Protoss player, and I beat him until he ran away. Chen Guang asked again, "Oh right, how do you activate your ability to turn a person into a sword?" Wu Tong smiled mysteriously, stretched out her right hand, and pointed her middle finger upward. Chen Guang did not understand. What kind of move is this? Do you really need me to explain it so clearly? I used my finger to make your sister Tang Ying do something, and then she lost consciousness and mutated. Chen Guang's mouth was wide open, and he was speechless for a long time. He was really shocked. Wu Tong blushed at his stare. We've thought about it before, but we've always been shy and didn't dare to try it. We don't have any other choice. We can't always be useless in the game. That's the theory, but this setting is too. Why, you don't like it? Are you unhappy? Is it because of her or me? Chen Guang waved his hands. No. So you don't care about me? Sister Wu Tong, look at the situation now. You're a bureau chief after all, so you should have some sense of propriety. Both of you are only D grade, but you can already fight against a C grade Protoss. This is the pinnacle of combat power among human players. Although it's a little wild for the sake of strength, it's understandable. Yep, that's it. I feel like you're laughing. Are you planning something bad in your head? Absolutely not. Is that so? That's a pity. Actually, I've discussed it with the Shadow Lady. If there's a chance, I'll let you try in the game to see if you can stimulate her. For the future of mankind. To defeat the evil Protoss, even if there's only a 1 in 10,000 chance of strengthening mankind, I'll do it. You're still saying you don't have any bad ideas? Actually, it's not impossible. Men are all like this. You can hide this from others, but you can't hide it from me, who deals with criminals all year round. Sooner or later, I'll bring you to justice. Wu Tong patted Qin Guang's shoulder. Oh right, what were you worried about just now? Chen Guang casually said his guess. You're saying that 2 groups of people have formed a party because of you without signing the party contract? Yep. What's wrong? What's wrong? I was wondering why I appeared in the same game as the Shadow Lady. Moreover, our birthplaces are very close to each other. I thought it was a coincidence, but now it seems like it was inevitable. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have exchanged for those 2 party contracts. They're so expensive. Then what do you think I should do? Should I let you join the Heaven Division? Should I continue to think of ways to infect more players? It's hard for me to explain to you the specifics, but this game has indeed been greatly influenced by me. I'll help you think about the first problem. It's very simple. Just give the suggestion and let them decide for themselves. Just like me, I'm not interested in joining the Heaven Division. Chen Guang was puzzled. Why is that? I've been in the system for so long. It wasn't easy for me to regain a free identity. I don't have to think about work all the time. In the end, I had to switch from the police system to the special forces system. Isn't that torture for me? But isn't your dream, life in the game should be different from life in real life, right? It's not that I'm tired of my job. Arresting criminals is addictive. I'll never tire of it. Do you know? In the past 6 months, the crime rate in my district has decreased by 1%. Chen Guang felt that Wu Tong's thoughts were contradictory, but he didn't know how to convince her. On second thought, it didn't seem necessary. Since she took the initiative to say it, she must have made up her mind. She should have known about the existence of the Heaven Division, but she chose to act independently. Didn't that mean she didn't want to join the Heaven Division? Alright, by the way, why can't I get through to Sister Tang Ying? She just came back and is busy. Didn't you give her a large sum of money? She's busy with her research institute. I thought she's no longer interested. How is that possible? God knows how interested she is now. Other than researching your genes, she found herself a new business. What business? She wants to decipher the connection between the game and the human psyche. She even thinks that the player's genes have been changed. Qin Guang was silent. In a sense, Tang Ying's guess wasn't wrong. However, it wasn't just the players that were changed. It was the entire universe. The level of change wasn't as simple as genes, but the fundamental particles and the rules of the universe. Chapter 12:38. Alright, I'll go look for her later. Save it. She said that she's only focused on getting the research institute up and running as soon as possible. She doesn't care about the outside world and only cares about the lab. Instead of looking for her, why don't you give her more money and invest in her research? You're not short of money anyway. Oh, by the way, she knew that you'd come to me to ask her, so she told me to send a sample to me when you're free, but you don't have to go. As she spoke, Wu Tong forwarded a message to Qin Guang that contained Tang Ying's message to him. Brat, the sample is running out. Hurry up. I, Tang Ying, am busy sending money. Chen Guang stared at the phone in a daze. Did Tang Ying's personality change after the world fusion? Also, what's with the sample? Does it mean that I have to make it myself and send it to her in a bottle? Will the delivery company accept it? If I were the delivery company, I'd probably call the police to arrest the pervert. By the way, if you really want to do something with her, why don't you come to our mission space when there's a mission in the game? S-class players can choose their own mission space, right? Chen Guang shook his head. I'm not sure. Then we'll talk about it later. There's no point in being impatient. Alright, you can leave now if there's nothing else. You're sending me off already? Of course not. I've been here for too long. There's a regional conference waiting for me. Recently, some players seem to be lost in the power they've suddenly gained. They don't seem to be very peaceful outside. The security management is quite stressful. After that, Wu Tong really turned around and left. But after taking 2 steps, she turned around and looked at Qin Guang in annoyance. Let me add something else. Tang Ying has already confessed to me about what you and Sister Tang Ying did on the plane. Qin Guang was stunned. His body stiffened as he did not know how to deal with the situation. He had the awkwardness of being a cat that was caught stealing fish. Fortunately, Wu Tong immediately said, "Come on, we are not ordinary people now. There are some things that we don't need to care so much. Relax. I've also heard some news that you accidentally encountered some dual cultivation technique when you were practicing martial arts. I understand. It's just that I'm a little unwilling to let you have it for free." After that, Wu Tongzhen left, leaving Qin Guang at a loss in the office. Was she angry or not? Also, I was asked to leave so early today. Is it because Sister Wu Tong is angry? Or was she really busy? He didn't understand the problem until he arrived at the Dawn Photocatalyst Research Institute, which had just been completed. However, he didn't have the right to dwell on the same thing. As the saying goes, the greater the power, the greater the responsibility. Although he didn't feel the overwhelming pressure, he had already shouldered a very heavy burden. Now, he was also afraid of the next game mission. It seemed that the advanced team led by Yu Ting had completed their mission perfectly, allowing the gods of the endless realm of the gods to be projected into the game on a large scale. The endless realm of the gods would never spend so much effort on useless things. The gods didn't just passively descend because of the fusion of the worlds. According to Yu Ting's previous performance, they came with a mission. Although he didn't know what their mission was, he certainly couldn't let them succeed. As early as when Qin Guang won the lawsuit with the 5 god-level formulas in Princeton, the Dawn Laboratory project was officially launched. The site selection, the purchase of the company's old factory, and the initial purchase of equipment and instruments were carried out almost simultaneously with the transformation of Zhujiangxi's results in Princeton's laboratory. Now, more than 90% of the civil construction of the Dawn Laboratory had been completed. Only some simple decoration work was left. As for the equipment, it couldn't be bought in a short time. First, it was expensive. Although Chen Guang's previous investment seemed to be expensive, it was still a long way from building a mature, top-notch photocatalyst laboratory. Second, a lot of the equipment had to be customized. It would take some time from the order to the production. Now that the global box office dividends of Women were gradually coming in, the $360 million reward from the dark web was also gradually being exchanged. After a while, Chen Guang would easily be able to spend hundreds of millions of USD in one go. At that time, Dawn Laboratory would become the world's top photocatalyst research institution, both hard and soft power. Of course, the most important thing now was to use the 5 kinds of photocatalysts that Zhujiangxi had mass-produced in Princeton's laboratory as soon as possible in the Tangshan Industrial Factory. First, it would solve the remaining problems of the Tangshan Industrial Factory once and for all. Second, it would officially announce the birth of Dawn Environmental Protection Group. Third, it would use industrial application to prove to the world that their photocatalyst formula was not just on paper, but it really had practical value. No matter how perfect the formulas on paper were or how perfect the theoretical conditions were, there was an irrefutable truth in the global scientific research industry. True knowledge could only be tested by practice. Before meeting Zhujiangxi, Chen Guang was already mentally prepared that Zhujiangxi might have become a player. Sure enough, as soon as he arrived at the laboratory, Hua Ling quickly closed the door, then turned around and looked at Qin Guang mysteriously. I finally see an S-level god in the flesh. He's just a little more handsome than the average person. Chen Guang was a little confused by her stare, then turned his head to look in the direction of Zhongyu and Zhujiangxi. Don't tell me the 3 of you have also become players? Hua Ling shrugged. What do you think? Otherwise, why would I say that in front of them? Having been shocked 3 times before, Qin Guang was now numb to it. Anyway, people who were quite close to him and often interacted with him were most likely people. Hey, if I'm not wrong, the 3 of you also have your own team in the game, right? Zhujiangxi, who was next to him, put down the test tube in her hand and looked at Qin Guang in surprise. How did you know? Sure enough, Qin Guang chuckled. If I said it was because of me, would you believe me? Zhujiangxi pondered for 2 seconds and said, Oh, I get it. Is it because your level is too high that people like us, who are often with you, are infected by your power? Then not only do we become players, but we can also naturally team up in the game? You can understand it that way. Anyway, that's the case. After chatting with the 3 of them for a while, Qin Guang gained a better understanding of their abilities before shifting his attention back to the photocatalyst. The game was scary, but life had to go on. In addition, the abilities of the 3 of them were also very strange. They had been through 4 mission spaces so far, but they had not encountered the slightest bit of danger. Every time they entered the game space, as long as the 3 of them exposed their abilities, not to mention other human players, even the Protoss would protect them. In reality, their work was scientific research, especially Zhujiangxi, who was proficient in environmental science, material science, chemistry, and physics. In the game, her ability was further strengthened. She could actually help others repair damaged equipment and items, and at the same time, she could modify equipment and make low-level items more powerful. As for Hua Ling, she was more hands-on. Every time she modified or repaired equipment, it was often Zhujiangxi who used her ability to come up with a set of plans, and then Hua Ling could complete it at a very fast speed. Of course, this process required the consumption of materials, and these materials had to be exchanged by others with reward points. Zhong Yu's main ability was to pre-process these materials. Moreover, she was good at environmental protection. She also had a special ability. For example, when she encountered a powerful fire-type magical beast, this kind of magical beast would often set up a scorching sea of fire or magma around it to facilitate its own combat. It could weaken the strength of the players and also allow itself to be like a fish in water. Zhong Yu could use her awakened talent to eliminate the impact of the phantom beast on the environment as much as possible. The team formed by the three of them did not pose any threat or lethality to others, but it was quite useful. It was simply a super logistics team that everyone loved. Chen Guang thought of the combat uniform he had seen when he experienced the slaughtering world, the various magical equipment that the genius high school student had transformed into, and the apocalypse tank and sniper of the old man's team. He thought to himself that if Zhuo Jingxi's team had been among the crowd at that time, the ordinary players would not have been so weak. Chapter 1239. He stayed in the laboratory for about an afternoon and saw with his own eyes the 5 photocatalysts he had invented himself. These 5 finished products were now stored in dozens of safes in the underground warehouse of the research institute. There were also extremely high-level security guards patrolling outside to prevent them from being stolen. On the other side, the metal carriers for the 5 finished catalysts were also being produced in full swing. The 5 pretreatment pools of Tangshan factory had long been built, and they were just waiting for the carriers coated with the new catalysts to be thrown into the pools. As for Zhuo Jingxi and the others, their current work included continuing to supervise the production of the customized equipment, perfecting and accepting the technical improvements of Tangshan factory, and perfecting and verifying the actual treatment effect of the new photocatalyst formula on the 5 kinds of ultra-difficult wastewater in the laboratory. Although everyone already knew the results, the popularization of every new process and new product often had to go through several processes: theoretical perfection, small-scale research, pilot verification, and industrial application verification. This wasn't superfluous, but a very rigorous scientific process. Chen Guang didn't understand this before, and he didn't care about it. These were all formulas he had used as a cheat. Although he was 100% sure of the effect, others might not think so. First, he would do a verification in the laboratory. This was the first time he had done it for others to see, and then he would do it again on the spot. There was no doubt about the conclusion. When he left, he wanted to ask Teacher Zhua out for a heart-to-heart talk in the evening, but she gave up on the idea on the spot. She said that she wouldn't leave until there were results in the laboratory. Now that the newly established Dawn Research Institute had recruited a lot of new employees, she didn't trust them. The Dawn Research Institute had hired quite professional security guards, and many of them had been borrowed from the military through their connections with the Chinese Academy of Sciences. At the very least, they were all professional Special Forces soldiers. In fact, these Special Forces soldiers also faced a situation where they could choose not to transfer. Their years of service had long exceeded the normal length of military service. According to the law, they could already choose to receive a large sum of money to return to ordinary life. However, these elites usually chose to continue serving because of the needs of the country and their personal patriotism. With their individual combat ability, it was easy for them to be promoted to the rank of sergeant, but there were all kinds of difficulties if they wanted to go further. They really weren't willing to be responsible for security for a private company. They couldn't afford to lose face. This time, the Chinese Academy of Sciences and the higher-ups of the military had both made an appearance. It was said that they were responsible for the security of Qin Guang's core industries. At the same time, although they had changed positions, they were still paid. They really managed to pull in a lot of experts from the military. With the capabilities of these people, Chen Guang felt that this side was quite reliable and there was no need to worry at all. Unfortunately, Zhuo Jingxi did not think so, so he could only run away with his tail between his legs. After busying himself outside for 2 whole days, it was rare for him to return to his house in the district outside Wujing University. Although he had become a millionaire, as the saying goes, no gold or silver nest can compare to your own kennel. It didn't matter if the house wasn't big, as long as it was comfortable. That was why he was so angry when his parents blew up the villa that Lilai's parents had painstakingly built. His anger reached its peak when he returned and saw that the room that was meant for him was gone. Now that he was alone in a room, he felt a little lonely. He thought that he might as well go back to school to stay. Otherwise, it would be too miserable to stay here alone. There wasn't even someone to brag to. In any case, school was about to start soon. In any case, he could wash his hands of all the company's matters. In any case, there was no difference whether he cared about the players' matters or not. When the next cup realm came, he could pull himself into the game. Wouldn't everything be clear then? S-rank player? As he crossed his legs and fiddled with the computer in front of him, Chen Guang pondered over this explanation. Although others often used this to describe him, he actually didn't know how the so-called S-rank was classified. No one would believe him if he said it. As his mind wandered, he casually fiddled with the mouse on the computer, looking around. He was still far from knowing the information related to the entire world's environment. Things that seemed like common sense in the eyes of others were the accumulated knowledge of many people over a decade or two. It might seem simple, but it was definitely not something that could be done in 3 days to memorize everything and not conflict with the old world's common sense system in his mind when communicating with others. For example, China's current GDP was nearly twice that of the United States. This completely conflicted with the impression in Chen Guang's mind. It was so conflicting that he almost couldn't change it. Therefore, when Chen Guang chatted with others, he was actually very careful, afraid that he would slip up and make things awkward. After browsing the news for a while, he felt a little annoyed. Watching the news with a purpose was completely different from taking out his phone to browse when he had nothing to do. He clicked on the entertainment news to change his train of thought and rest his brain. He happened to see Jin Shuiwei and Jiang Ye's names on the headlines. Women swept the global box office. Of course, Chen Guang wasn't the only one who became popular. The other main leads in the film, Ren Chong, Zhou Ye, Zhao Yueling, and the others, had their salaries and net worth soar. In just 3 to 4 months, they had at least received several high-paying contracts. As for Jin Shuiwei and Jiang Ye, who were already extremely popular, there was no need to mention them. No matter how powerful Chinese entertainment was in the New World, the natural barrier between Chinese and English in the entertainment culture was inevitable. Although Hollywood in the New World wasn't as powerful as in the Old World, it at least occupied half of the world's market with Chinese films. Furthermore, most of the time, the two sides didn't overlap. After this battle, the left and right-hand duo could be considered to have completely broken through the barrier between the two major language families and made a name for themselves in the English-speaking area. Although the two of them performed rather mediocre in scenes without Chen Guang, as long as Chen Guang appeared or filmed scenes with others on set, it would definitely be worth the price of the ticket. As for the news that Chen Guang saw now, it was that the two of them planned to follow up on their victory and release an all-English album. Although the two of them had been child stars since they were young and could only be said to be at the level of an ordinary person in cultural classes, they benefited from the fact that they had gone abroad early to further their studies at the Tchaikovsky Academy of Music and other prestigious academies, so their spoken English was pretty good. In the past half a year, because of Chen Guang's participation in the world language competition, Jiang Ye and Jin Shuiwei, who had evil intentions, took the initiative to cram in their spoken English. Now was the time to record an all-English album, so that people wouldn't feel like they were salt and pepper when they sang it. Looking at Jiang Ye's beautiful photos in the news, Chen Guang's mind couldn't help but think of some inappropriate scenes. He turned on his phone, but it was a pity that he didn't know when his previous inventory had been emptied. It was quite a pity. Chen Guang decided to find a sufficient reason for himself. That's right, in order to provide samples for the Great Life Sciences Research Institute, I can't be so selfish. I should take the initiative to sacrifice and contribute. Also, seeing that the two of them are still in the mood to think about the new album, it seems that they aren't sure if the two of them have become players. Now that I've come out of seclusion, it's reasonable for me to take the initiative to care about them. Therefore, he picked up his phone and decisively called Jiang Yage. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.